Chapter 476. Emo-Shi's demonic dragon claw had always been invincible in the past. No matter how hard something was, under the invisible force of the sharp claws, it was only a matter of a single claw. And now, this giant python's scales could actually withstand the attack of his sharp claws. It was really surprising. Emo-Shi didn't know that this giant python had once received the favor of the Phoenix Master and had the blood of the dragon race flowing in its body. In addition, its snake scales had strong defensive power, so it could withstand Emo-Shi's sharp claws. This 9-headed giant python was also very shocked when it saw Emo-Shi break the river with one claw. It was afraid that it couldn't withstand Emo-Shi's claw. At this moment, seeing that Emo-Shi's claw only left a small crack on its body, it was immediately relieved. The 9 heads opened their mouths one after another. From the 9 huge mouths, hoarse hisses came out. Hiss, hiss, hiss. At the same time, the 9 huge mouths not only spat out venom. At the same time, it also spat out dark green energy towards Emo-Shi. This dark green energy not only had powerful destructive power, but also had intense toxicity and corrosiveness. If anyone was sprayed, they would be like melted chocolate in minutes. Seeing this, Emo-Shi's figure flashed and instantly dodged the energy and venom. At the same time, he had already arrived at an altitude of 10,000 meters. The next moment, his body quickly expanded. His clothes were torn apart. Scales appeared on his body. On his back, a pair of tattered wings grew. A long tail quickly grew out as well. In just 5 seconds, he had transformed into a giant dragon. However, at this moment he had changed compared to before. On his back, behind the previous pair of wings, there was another pair of slightly smaller wings. 4-winged demonic dragon. In the legends of the Flaming Continent, giant dragons basically had 2 wings. 4-winged giant dragons rarely appeared. And giant dragons with 4 wings were all mutated dragons that had reached the peak of their combat strength. As a bloodthirsty demonic dragon, the more Emo-Shi killed, the more likely it was for him to mutate. In the past few days, he had slaughtered at least 80 million mutated desolate beasts, snakes and ghouls, if not 100 million. Such a frenzied slaughter finally caused his demonic dragon body to mutate. He had become a 4-winged demonic dragon. A 4-winged demonic dragon's combat power far exceeded that of a giant dragon of the same level. To give a simple example, a Tier 1 4-winged mystic dragon could easily kill a Tier 4 colossal dragon that was 3 tiers above it. In addition to Emo-Shi's various skills and powerful dragon will. Now, he could easily kill other giant dragons that were 5 levels above him. Of course, this was referring to powerful giant dragons. If he was compared to humans or mutated desolate beasts, after transforming into a 4-winged demonic dragon, he would be able to kill a rank 7 Grand Desolate Master without any pressure. Roar! Emo-Shi couldn't help but let loose an excited roar as he sensed the surging energy within his body. Its 170-meter-long body seemed somewhat small compared to the 2,000-meter-long python on the ground. However, on the ground, the 9-headed python that was more than 2,000 meters long couldn't help but tremble under this dragon roar. It wasn't just this 9-headed python. All the other mutated desolate beasts and pythons around couldn't help but tremble. After all, this was a real colossal dragon. Longwei was vast and mighty, and no one dared to disobey. At the same time, more than 200 kilometers away. When the 5 of them heard the dragon roar, their bodies trembled. They couldn't help but prostrate on the ground. Fortunately, they were far enough away so they could barely hold on. One of them was shocked and pale as he asked, "What's going on?" Another asked, "What's that sound?" It seems to be a powerful desolate beast. But no matter how strong a desolate beast is, it's impossible for us to have the urge to worship it from 200 kilometers away. At this moment, the spirit psyche master next to them only felt that his entire body was soft. He couldn't help but fall to the ground with a plop. Those people were shocked and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" The spirit psyche master made a gulping sound in his throat and replied, It's a colossal dragon, a real colossal dragon, a 4-winged colossal dragon." After saying these words, he seemed to have used up all his strength and couldn't say another word. The others looked at each other in dismay. A real colossal dragon? And a 4-winged one? What a joke. The colossal dragons had been extinct for tens of thousands of years. And even if a colossal dragon appeared, it should have appeared in the Flaming Origin continent. It shouldn't have appeared in this mere hunting ground. This was like telling me that a colossal dragon appeared in your pigsty. But they all knew that this spirit psyche master rarely joked. Not to mention at this time. They realized that the situation wasn't right and asked the spirit psyche master, "Then, should we retreat now or The Spirit Psyche Master paused for a moment before speaking. No, the Phoenix Master is at a critical moment. We can't retreat. I only hope that colossal dragon isn't coming for us. Hearing this, the others nodded in agreement. At the same time at the scene, after Immortality transformed into a four-winged colossal dragon, he circled in the air. Using the wind he swooped down. Black ice dragon breath. A white dragon breath spewed out. A thick layer of ice immediately formed on the ground. Whether it was rocks, grass, rivers, wild beasts, or giant pythons, they all turned into ice sculptures. The nine-headed giant python also turned into ice sculptures from its tail to its head. Its 9 heads still wanted to make a final struggle before death. But it was already too late. Crack, crack, crack. In the end, its head was completely sealed in ice. This kind of ice seal wasn't simply sealing it inside. Instead, it invaded its skin, invaded its body, invaded its every cell, and invaded its bone marrow. From the outside to the inside, from top to bottom, it was crystal clear and cold. For a time, everything within a radius of 10 kilometers was frozen. Immortality's dragons will swept across. Whoosh, all the ice sculptures were shattered by his dragon's will. The 9-headed giant python's body also shattered into blood-colored ice cubes on the ground. Previously, the 9-headed giant python could still fight a few rounds with Immortality. But after Immortality transformed into a 4-winged demonic dragon, the 9-headed giant python was instantly killed by him in a single move. This couldn't even be considered a warm-up for him. Now that he had transformed into a demonic dragon, he naturally wouldn't let these wild beasts and giant pythons go so easily. In the sky he circled again, turned around, and flew down. Whether it was the giant python or the mutated wild beasts, they didn't even dare to escape under Immortality's long way. Immortality opened his mouth and spat out a red flame dragon breath. Boom! The flames instantly spread dozens of kilometers. Within these dozens of kilometers, there was a sea of fire. In the sea of fire, all the creatures were screaming, wailing, and rolling. At the same time, in Immortality's mind, the kill points were rising crazily again. Chapter 477. After Immortality revealed his demonic dragon true form, his battle could only be described with one word: unstoppable. All the mutated wild beasts and giant pythons didn't even dare to fart in front of him. They could only watch him descend from the sky over and over again. Every time he swooped down, he would take tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of lives. Slaughter. This was a true massacre. This was the true bloodthirsty demonic dragon. Amidst such slaughter, his evolution points were also skyrocketing. When he had killed more than half of the beast-tide and half of the giant pythons, in his mind, the system's notification sounded again. Slaughter points have reached 100 million. You can level up. Do you wish to level up now? Immortality didn't choose to level up immediately this time. There were probably millions of wild beasts and giant pythons below. He would kill them all first. So Immortality continued to move back and forth between the sky and the ground. In the end, he killed all the wild beasts and giant pythons. At this time, in his mind, his slaughter points had reached 110 million. At this time, his draconic sense swept across and found that there were almost no creatures left on the ground. Only then did he transform back into his human form. He changed his clothes and returned to the microspace. In his mind it said, "You can level up now." The system's voice sounded frowny-faced. "This level up will take 48 hours. Immortality nodded silently. At this time, Emma and Happy had already prepared several of Immortality's favorite dishes. After Immortality ate, he let out a long yawn. Then he hid on the soft bed. Not long after, he started to snort. At the same time, in the Snake Valley outside, those people originally thought that they wouldn't be able to escape this time. Unexpectedly, the giant dragon didn't come over. Instead, after killing almost all the snakes and wild beasts, it transformed back into its human form and suddenly disappeared. Only then did they breathe a sigh of relief. "Quickly report to boss," the psychic said. Because they were too shocked and scared just now, they completely forgot to report to boss. Soon their boss received the news. Then his expression suddenly changed. A giant dragon? And a four-winged one? When the others heard boss's words, they were also stunned. What kind of joke is this? This joke is a little too much. Maybe it's just a dragon-like creature. The giant dragons had long been extinct. How could they appear here? Even if there really is a dragon, it should be on the Flaming Origin continent. That's right. Up until now, all of the giant dragon fossils we've discovered have been found on the Flame continent. We didn't find anything related to dragons in any hunting grounds. However, the leader of the group did not smile. He knew that since these people would send such a message they must have confirmed it. He pondered for a moment and replied, "Continue to investigate. At the same time, pay attention to hiding. Don't act rashly." Then he said to the rest of the people around him, "We have to break the seal as soon as possible. Then leave this damn place." When the rest of the people heard their boss say so, they didn't dare to question him anymore. They all nodded and started to get busy again. They busied themselves for another day and night. Finally, at a certain moment, they poured a large amount of energy into the formation. The formation finally dissipated completely. At the same time, the imperial mausoleum where the Snake Emperor was buried also collapsed. The mountain, which was thousands of meters high, collapsed. Rocks flew everywhere and rolled down the entire valley. At the same time, the rocks completely covered the entrance of the imperial mausoleum. These people spent another half a day cleaning up the rocks at the entrance of the cave. Fortunately, they were all level 10 Desolate Hunters. The leader was even a level 1 Grand Desolate Master. Therefore, it wasn't too difficult for them to clean up. After cleaning up the rocks at the entrance of the cave, they entered the tomb. In the tomb, they found the mummified corpse of a giant python that was thousands of meters long. The upper body of the mummified corpse was that of a human, and the lower body of a giant python. This should be the Snake Emperor from back then. This caused everyone to rejoice in their hearts. It seemed that the legends of the past were true. Since they had found the Snake Emperor, the Phoenix Master must be in this tomb. They spent another half a day looking for the Phoenix Master in this huge tomb. However, during this half a day, they searched almost every inch of this huge tomb, but they didn't find the Phoenix Master. Their two spiritual psyche masters searched almost every inch of this Immortality, but they still couldn't find the Phoenix Master. Not to mention the Phoenix Master, they couldn't even find anything related to the Phoenix Master. This made everyone feel dizzy. They had been preparing for hundreds of years. Before their seniors died, they had told them that they must open the Imperial Mausoleum and save the Phoenix Master. Now, after hundreds of years, the efforts of several generations, they had finally waited for the day when the Dragon Clan was destroyed. After going through countless difficulties and dangers, they finally opened the Imperial Mausoleum. However, reality gave them a heavy blow. The Phoenix Master was actually not inside. They couldn't believe this fact. Next, they searched the Imperial Mausoleum and its surroundings for 2 days, but they still couldn't find the Phoenix Master. Although they were unwilling, they could only leave. When they left, these people were a little dazed. They had worked hard for several generations, but in the end, they found that the goal they were fighting for didn't exist at all. This kind of disappointment, this feeling of being deceived, made all of them feel an indescribable disappointment and anger in their hearts. It was also at this time that Immortality returned to the Hell Python Star after sleeping for more than a day and resting in the miniature world. At this time he was promoted to a level 8 Desolate Hunter. The Sea Dragon clone had also been promoted to a level 8 Strong Mutated Desolate Beast. In terms of realm, it was equivalent to a level 8 Grand Desolate Master. And the strength of the Sea Dragon clone could challenge people 2 levels higher. Therefore, the Sea Dragon clone was equivalent to a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. In the entire Flaming Origin continent, it could be said to be an invincible existence. Therefore, the sense of urgency in Immortality's heart was no longer as strong as before. In the past, in order to not be bullied and killed, he had to improve his strength as soon as possible. Now, the Sea Dragon clone was already the pinnacle existence on the continent. Then he could take his time and slowly improve his strength. It had been a long time since he had this feeling, and Immortality still enjoyed it very much. After returning to the Hell Python Star, Immortality's dragon consciousness swept across. He found that within the range of his detection, the entire Snake Valley was deathly silent. One had to know that in this Snake Valley there were snakes everywhere. Almost every few steps he would step on one. Now there wasn't even a snake. There were only some broken snake corpses on the ground and some broken limbs of desolate beasts. The blood on the stones, grass, and trees had already formed a thick layer of black and red scabs. Chapter 478. Immortality left the miniature world and returned to the Snake Valley. There was dead silence in the Snake Valley. It looked like a completely different world compared to the snake that was full of vitality earlier. Immortality shook his head and looked at the kill points in his mind. Kill points: 130027331000000000. More than 13 million kill points. The next upgrade would require a terrifying 1 billion. Immortality estimated that he should be able to kill more than half of the mutated desolate beasts on this planet. Of course, if he really did kill more than half of them, the 20th hunting island would definitely find out and interfere. After all, killing more than half of them would severely damage the ecology of this planet. The 20th hunting island would not sit by and do nothing. However, Immortality did not care. He had paid 30 million for a year. Within this year he could kill as much as he wanted. In theory, even if he completely destroyed this planet, there would be no problems. Hence, he continued to kill these mutated desolate beasts in the Yama forest. However, many of the desolate beasts in the Yama forest had gone to the Snake Valley. Now, the number of desolate beasts left was much smaller. The speed at which Immortality collected kill points had obviously decreased. After more than a month, he finally collected 100 million evolution points. At this time, he had already killed 2/3 of the entire Yama forest. In the Yama forest, the number of evolution points he obtained was decreasing. Hence, he could only leave the Yama forest and go to the 10,000 corpse forest. The 10,000 corpse forest was a place where ghouls gathered. There were many ghouls there. Moreover, they would often capture humans and kill them, hanging them on trees and letting them rot quickly. Hence, it was called the 10,000 corpse forest. Everyone who was lucky enough to see the 10,000 corpse forest said that it was the most terrifying place they had ever seen. They did not want to go to the 10,000 corpse forest even if they were beaten to death. At this time, Immortality was heading towards the 10,000 corpse forest. The 10,000 corpse forest was a huge forest. In this forest there were no mountains or basins. There was not even a small hill. The terrain was very flat. The area of several million square kilometers was so flat that it was as if someone had deliberately leveled it and planted trees. In this forest, half of the creatures were ghouls. The remaining half were other types of desolate beasts. These ghouls could go without food for 10 days to half a month. Therefore, they would not easily eat these desolate beasts. Instead, they would think of ways to find humans. After killing them, they would hang them on trees and let them rot. According to the information, there were hundreds of millions of ghouls here. Basically, their strength was equivalent to that of a desolate hunter. If he killed them all, he would be able to obtain hundreds of millions of kill points. Thus, Immortality quickly flew towards the center of the myriad corpse forest, looking down from where he was flying. Within the 10,000 corpse forest, there were indeed many humanoid creatures hanging on the trees. Some had just been hung up and hadn't rotted yet. Some were half-rotten. Some had completely rotted away. Under the sunlight, it emitted an unpleasant smell. However, not all of them were human corpses like in the legends. It could be seen that the human corpses were only a small portion. There were even more desolate beast corpses. However, most of them were humanoid corpses. It seemed that there was a huge discrepancy between the legend and the truth. After all, there were hundreds of millions of ghouls here. If they all went to eat humans, then there would only be a few billion humans on the entire Hell Python star. Wouldn't they be eaten up very quickly? Following that, Immortality began his massacre in the myriad corpse forest. As the ghouls weren't gathered like the snakes in the Snake Ghost, they were more scattered. Therefore, the speed at which he collected kill points was much slower. Immortality spent a total of 5 days or so before he killed all the ghouls and mutated desolate beasts in the myriad corpse forest. It was also on this day that he received a piece of good news. When he killed the last ghoul, he discovered that his dragons will had unknowingly become dozens of times stronger than before. At this moment, a system notification sounded in his mind. Frowny face. Congratulations to the host for leveling up to level 1 Long Yen Shi. Immortality was stunned. This was the first time he had leveled up unknowingly. Above the Long Yen Shi was the Long Yen Shi. And the Long Yen Shi was much stronger than the Long Yen Shi. Immortality spread out his dragon's will. It instantly covered a radius of 1,000 kilometers. Within 1,000 kilometers, nothing could escape his dragon's will. At the same time, after leveling up to the Long Yen Shi, he had an additional skill related to Dragon's Will. Dragon's Will Seal. The formless Dragon's Will formed a huge formless seal within a radius of 50 kilometers. It descended from the sky. Anything below would be crushed into pieces. And the terrifying thing about this Dragon's Will seal was that it had 2 forms. One was an area of effect attack form. In its normal form, one seal could kill any creature below the Grand Desolate Master level. The other was a single target attack form. The single target attack form could be used to attack a Grand Desolate Master. Not only could it attack a Grand Desolate Master, but it could also absorb energy from the outside world to attack the target. It could even absorb the energy released by the target to kill the target. This was quite terrifying. The stronger the enemy, the stronger the Dragon's Will seal. Of course, in its single target attack form, it had a time limit. At most, it could only exist for a minute. Otherwise, if it kept absorbing, wouldn't it be invincible? It seemed that the 30 million spent this time was really worth it. Not only had he leveled up by 3 levels, but his dragon's body had also mutated into a 4-winged bloodthirsty demonic dragon. His dragons will had leveled up to the Long Yen Shi. If possible, he would rather spend another 300 billion to increase his strength. However, the target planet was already very limited in terms of the increase in his strength. At most, he would stay here for a few more months. After collecting 1 billion kill points, it was time to leave. Therefore, in the next 2 months, Shi spent his time in killing. His kill points were also slowly increasing. On this day he had been on the Hell Python star for 90 days. It was also on this day that the system's notification sounded in his mind. Frowny face. Congratulations to the host for leveling up to a level 9 Desolate Master. Shi was a little confused. He looked at his kill points. It was only 300 million kill points, far from the 1 billion needed for leveling up. Why did he suddenly level up? The system seemed to know Shi's thoughts and replied in his mind. Frowny face. The Dragon Palace Desolate Master refining platform has successfully refined 10 Grand Desolate Masters. The host's level has increased by 1. Hearing this, Shi finally understood what was going on. This could be improved. The system's voice sounded again. Frowny face. Next time, 100 Grand Desolate Masters need to be refined, and the host will be able to level up again. Shi shook his head. Sigh, this system couldn't be praised. To refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters, it would take 1,000 days. More than 2 years, only 1 level up. It was a little useless. The system's voice sounded. Frowny face. After the Dragon Palace leveled up, the scale of the Desolate Master refining platform can be expanded. Hearing this, Shi nodded in satisfaction. Seems like this system is quite humane. Chapter 479. Shi had been on the Hell Python star for 3 months. Since the Dragon Palace refining platform had already refined 10 Grand Desolate Masters, Shi's level had also increased by 1. He had become a level 9 Desolate Hunter. Looking at his mind, he needed 10 billion kill points to advance to level 10. And his current kill points were only a little more than 300 million. It seemed that it was impossible to advance to level 10 on the Hell Python star. He had to go to a higher level hunting ground. Thinking of this, Shi left the wilderness and returned to base number 1. When he returned to base number 1, he frowned slightly. But it was only a slight frown. Then, his expression was normal as he walked towards the base. Previously, Wei had already ordered the employees in the base to be on standby and ready to serve Shi once they saw him return. A beautiful employee immediately stepped forward and asked, "What's the matter?" "Sir, it's my pleasure to serve you. If you need anything, feel free to ask me. I'll try my best to satisfy you." Hearing this, Shi looked at the beautiful employee from head to toe. He asked with a smile, "Any request?" The beautiful employee's face immediately flushed red. But she still nodded and said softly, "Yes." She had been working here for a long time and had met many people. How could she not know what Shi meant? But Sister Wei had already said that she had to satisfy any request of this gentleman. She naturally did not dare to neglect. And since Sister Wei had said so, it could be seen that this gentleman's status must be very high. At the very least, he should be on equal footing with the island master. If she was lucky enough to get close to this gentleman, then she wouldn't have to work hard for the rest of her life. But it was obvious that Shi was just joking. Although this beautiful employee was beautiful, she could be said to be 1 in 100. But in terms of beauty, she couldn't compare to Happy. In terms of figure, she couldn't compare to Emma. In terms of femininity, she couldn't compare to Wei. Shi naturally couldn't really have any request for her. Shi returned to the room that Sister Wei had arranged for him and took a shower first. Then he came to the leisure area. He ordered a cup of good tea and slowly sipped it. He admired the scenery outside the window. Speaking of which, this leisure area really made people feel peaceful. He sipped his tea and enjoyed the beautiful scenery outside the window. It had been a long time since Shi enjoyed himself like this. This was what life was like. While he was enjoying all this, Sister Wei had unknowingly walked up to him. He also ordered a cup of tea. She picked up the teacup and gently walked to Shi's side and sat down. "What do you think of this place?" Shi nodded. "Yes, very good." Sister Wei stroked her hair with a chuckle and asked, "What do you think of me?" Shi nodded. "Yes, very good." Sister Wei pursed her lips and said, "You don't seem sincere." Shi laughed and said, "Did I get sick from praising you?" Sister Wei took a sip of tea and said to Shi, "Have you ever thought about settling down?" Shi asked, "What do you mean?" Sister Wei looked at the huge lake outside the window and replied, I'm old and want to live a quiet life. Are you willing to go with Sister Wei? This sudden question surprised Emoshur a little. He involuntarily glanced at the men not far away. Sister Wei was the dream of many men here. And she was the leader of this base. Now she took the initiative to say this to him, which was really beyond Emoshur's expectation. What? You don't want to? Sister Wei looked into Emoshur's eyes and asked with a smile. Emoshur shook his head with a smile. Sister Wei, don't make enemies for me, okay? Sister Wei also glanced at the other men around her and chuckled. I'm just joking with you. You've been fighting in the wilderness these days and your nerves are too tense. It's good for you to relax. Emoshur nodded. Well, thank you for your concern. But even if it was a joke, it still aroused the jealousy of the men around her. Sister Wei's every frown and smile was too attractive. Even such a joke made them unable to control themselves. If it were them, they would have agreed on the spot. Then Sister Wei asked again, Are you going to leave this time? Emoshur nodded. Yes. Sister Wei said, You spent 30 million for a year and now you want to leave after only 2 months? Isn't it too much of a loss? Emoshur said, Take the extra money as a tip. Oh, you're so generous. Emoshur shrugged. I've always been like this. The two chatted for a while. When the sun set, Emoshur returned to his residence. At about 3 o'clock at night. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Emoshur was very unhappy to be woken up by the doorbell. He got up and went to the door. Outside the door was a man. Emoshur frowned and stared at the man without saying anything. He had seen this man during the day and he had a deep impression of him. Because every time Sister Wei appeared, he would appear with her. His eyes always showed his deep love for Sister Wei. Was it because he heard his joke with Sister Wei during the day so he was burning with jealousy and wanted to take revenge on him? Thinking of this, Emoshur planned to plunder his memory and check it out. But at this moment, a dagger suddenly appeared in the man's right hand. The dagger was imbued with energy and stabbed directly at Emoshur's abdomen. Emoshur had been prepared, so naturally he would not be stabbed. His figure flashed slightly and dodged the dagger. Because the man used too much force, he directly fell into the room. He suddenly turned back and stabbed at Emoshur again. This time, Emoshur did not dodge. Instead, he raised his hand and kicked at the man's body. Bang! This kick was extremely heavy. The kick landed heavily on the man's abdomen. The man immediately flew out. However, halfway through the flight, the man's lower body quickly changed. Almost in an instant, his legs turned into a snake tail. It wrapped around the pillar next to him. Then with a jerk, his body flew toward Emoshur again. At the same time, the dagger in his hand also flashed with cold light and stabbed straight at Emoshur's chest. Emoshur was slightly surprised. This man was from the snake clan? Was it because he had killed too many snakes so he was here to take revenge? But there was no time to think. Emoshur's mind flickered, and a chain instantly flew out. This chain was completely black, but it grew with the wind. At first it was only 2 meters long. But the moment it flew out, it became more than 10 meters long. It directly wrapped around the man's body. Whoosh! With a sound, the man with a human head and a snake body was directly tied up tightly. That person used all the strength he had in his life to struggle. But no matter how he struggled, he could not break free. He naturally did not know that this was the dragon binding rope. It could even bind a giant dragon, let alone a mere snake. Chapter 480. Emoshur used the dragon binding rope to tie up the person with the human head and snake body. That person continued to struggle, using all the strength in his body to break free. But this was easier said than done. This was the dragon binding rope. It can even bind a dragon, let alone a small snake like you. That person's thoughts changed at this moment and he begged Emoshur for mercy. Don't kill me, I can tell you. Before he finished speaking, Emoshur's sharp claws had already pierced through his head. Then one point. His head was like a watermelon, divided into 6 pieces. That person did not understand why this human was so ruthless until he died. He did not hesitate to attack. Of course, he did not know that Emoshur had the memory plundering skill. He had already plundered his memories. It was also at this moment that a beautiful figure suddenly arrived. This person was none other than Enwei. She saw that Emoshur was still standing and did not seem to be injured. Only then did she relax. She asked, Mr. Emo, are you all right? Emoshur shook his head. I'm fine. Enwei frowned and said, It was my negligence that allowed the enemy to sneak in. This person is from the Snake Clan. After hundreds of years of cultivation, he turned into a human. Mr. Emo, do you have any grudges with the Snake Clan? Emosher smiled faintly and said, "It's nothing. I just slaughtered the Snake Valley." Anwei was stunned. Slaughtered the Snake Valley? Mr. Emo, are you joking? Although she had never been to the Snake Valley. But after being here for so many years, she knew how terrifying the Snake Valley was. It could be said to be one of the most terrifying places in the entire Hell Python Star. Even a grand desolate master like her did not dare to go to that place. Now this Mr. Emo actually said that he had slaughtered the Snake Valley. How could this not shock her? And he said it so casually. He called slaughtering the Snake Valley nothing. Wasn't this too exaggerated? After regaining her senses, Anwei said, "No wonder. These Snake Clan will take revenge for the smallest grievance. You slaughtered the entire Snake Valley, so they will definitely come looking for trouble with you. So I suggest you leave the Hell Python Star as soon as possible. Otherwise," Emosher nodded, "and there's no use for me to stay here now. Make arrangements for me as soon as possible. I'll return to the Hell Python Star tomorrow morning." "All right." While the two were talking, hiss. A hissing sound came from the other side of the wall. Both of them turned their heads at the same time. He saw a snake head the size of a human head poking out from the wall. Then, the second, the third, the fourth, soon snake heads of various sizes appeared on the wall. The next moment, boom, the wall came crashing down. Amidst the smoke and dust, hundreds and thousands of snakes swarmed in from the outside. It was as if a colorful carpet had been pulled in from the outside. Several security guards were patrolling when they suddenly heard the roar. He hurried over. However, when they saw this scene, they immediately felt their scalps go numb. A chill ran down his spine. Even the scariest scene they had seen in their lives was not as terrifying as this. Several security guards hurriedly fled into the distance. At the same time, they blew the siren. Beep beep beep, beep beep beep, beep beep beep, in the base's surveillance room. The security guard was leaning on the chair with his feet on the console, snoring continuously. When he heard the siren, he was so shocked that he almost fell to the ground. When he looked up at the surveillance camera, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. F***CK. In panic, he hurriedly pressed the alarm in the entire base. Woo woo, woo. The sound of an ambush alarm immediately spread throughout the base. Most of the people in the base were in a deep sleep. When they heard the alarm, they hurriedly got up and looked out the window. When they saw the situation outside the window, their hair immediately stood on end. This tide of snakes was coming from all directions. They would bite anyone they saw. Moreover, these snakes were highly poisonous. Once one was bitten to the ground, one would die within minutes. Even if the doors and windows were closed and they hid in the room, those giant pythons that were hundreds of meters long could destroy the house in minutes. The people who flew into the air to escape were smashed down by the giant pythons who were already prepared with their tails. For a time, the entire base was filled with cries and screams. Emosher looked at this and did not make a move to save these people. When he first came, these people were not very friendly to him. Moreover, he had something else to do. When Anwei saw this scene, she could not help but turn pale. "Oh no, the base's defense system has been destroyed." Then she pulled Emosher and said, "Mr. Emo, let's go to the teleportation hall immediately. I'll send you back to the Flaming Land first." Emosher allowed her to pull him along as he quickly ran towards her. Soon, the two arrived at the teleportation hall's entrance. However, at this moment, hundreds of snakes behind them were not far away. They did not have time to activate the teleportation device. Anwei gritted her teeth and said to Emosher, "Mr. Emo, hurry up and leave. I'll help you buy time." As she spoke, she had already condensed an energy weapon on her right arm. She waved her hand casually. Whoosh, a beam of energy swept across in front of her. As many as 50 snakes of various sizes were directly blown up by her energy. She slashed out a few more times and as many as 200 snakes of various sizes were blown up by her. Then she turned her head and said to Emosher, "Mr. Emo, hurry up and leave." Emosher nodded. "Thank you." As he spoke, he did not hesitate and turned to walk toward the teleportation hall. However, at this moment, Anwei's energy weapon suddenly aimed at Emosher's back. Whoosh, a beam of energy instantly attacked Emosher's back. At the same time, Emosher's figure instantly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was already behind Anwei. Moreover, there was a trace of a mysterious smile at the corner of his mouth as he looked at Anwei. Anwei's expression changed slightly. "You saw through it?" Emosher nodded. Anwei frowned and asked, "How did you see through it?" Emosher did not answer directly and only smiled faintly. "You should think about how you were exposed." Anwei's face no longer had that charming smile of a woman. Instead, there was a trace of coldness. In her mind, she thought about where exactly she had overlooked. After thinking for a moment, she secretly shook her head. She felt that everything was done very carefully and there was no flaw in the fake path. How did Immortality see through it? Of course, she did not know that Immortality had the ability to plunder memories. When he had returned to the base, he had felt that something was wrong. He had already plundered many people's memories. In the end, he realized that something was wrong because of Enwei. Enwei already knew that Immortality had slaughtered the Snake Valley. Therefore, she had already made up her mind to kill Immortality. Moreover, according to the memories that Immortality had plundered, she had an even bigger secret. She was the Phoenix Master. Chapter 481. Immortality learned a huge secret from Enwei's memories. Enwei was the Phoenix Master. It turned out that Enwei had already broken the seal of the formation from the inside more than 50 years ago and escaped. However, the Dragon Clan was still around at that time, so she didn't make it public. Instead, she found a way to sneak into the human race. Firstly, she was beautiful, and secondly, she was very capable. In the end, she actually became the leader of the base. Moreover, after so many years, her realm had also increased a lot. Her current true strength was already at the level of a grade 9 Grand Desolate Master. However, she didn't make it too obvious. She planned to go to the Flaming Land after breaking through to level 10. At that time, she would be the absolute peak existence of the Flaming Land. But at this moment, Immortality appeared. And he even massacred the entire Snake Valley. Although she was forced to marry the Snake Emperor. Later on, she had already conquered the entire Snake Valley. Therefore, all the Snake Clan in the Snake Valley were her people. Those tens of thousands of Snake Clan were also the foundation for her to conquer the entire Flaming Land in the future. After all, the Flaming Land was too big. No matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to rule every corner. But who would have thought that Immortality actually massacred the Snake Valley? Almost all the core disciples of the Snake Clan were killed. How could this not make her angry? Therefore, she planned to make a move on Immortality. Moreover, she had heard before that Immortality had a lot to do with the destruction of the Dragon Clan. The Island Master even guessed that the person who destroyed the Dragon Clan was Immortality. Therefore, she didn't act rashly. Instead, she set up a slow-acting poison in Immortality's room. At the same time, when she was chatting with Immortality last night, she also secretly drugged Immortality's tea. Moreover, she had seen Immortality drink the drugged tea with her own eyes. Even so, she was still worried. Therefore, she deliberately let the Snake Clan attack the base. At the same time, she bought time for Immortality and won Immortality's trust. Only then did she suddenly attack from behind. But unexpectedly, Immortality dodged this attack. However, although she was surprised that Immortality dodged the first attack, the smile on her face didn't fade. You've been poisoned by the Snake Clan's poison. The more intense the exercise, the faster the poison would take effect. Let's see how long you can last tonight. As he spoke, energy beams shot out one after another towards Immortality. Immortality quickly used teleportation to dodge the attacks. Using teleportation, it was very easy to avoid these energies. However, he knew that he wouldn't be able to kill this woman just by teleporting. When the Phoenix Master saw how smoothly Immortality used teleportation, she frowned slightly. It had already been 3 minutes, but he still couldn't kill this kid. Logically speaking, this kid had teleported for 3 minutes, so his poison should have taken effect long ago. Why hasn't it worked yet? Until now, he still hadn't figured out the depth of this kid's strength. It seemed that he had to show some of his true abilities. Thinking of this, green scales quickly covered her entire body. His legs quickly turned into a snake's body. It had a human head and a snake body. Furthermore, her body was rapidly growing in size. In just a few seconds, it turned into a giant python that was more than 5,000 meters long. Moreover, between the gaps of her scales, a fiery red glow could be seen. It was as if her body was filled with magma. At this moment, the remaining people in the base were all shocked when they saw this scene. Even though they were basically all level 10 desolate hunters, when had they ever seen such a terrifying giant python? Immortality looked at the giant python that was more than 5,000 meters long. Species, Hell Python. Level 10 strong mutated desolate beast. Seeing this, Immortality was slightly surprised. After this woman revealed her true form, she was actually a Hell Python. And this Hell Python was actually a level 10 strong mutated desolate beast. This was equivalent to a level 10 desolate master. It wasn't something he could resist at all. Who would have thought that such a beautiful and feminine person would be the leader of the Snake Clan? Moreover, it was the most terrifying species on this planet, Hell Python. Why was the Hell Python star called Hell Python star? It wasn't because there were many pythons on it. It was because the most terrifying species on this planet was called hell python. However, according to the previous settings, the hell python's strength was at most a level 1 strong mutated beast. But who would have thought that after the Phoenix Master fused with the hell python's blood, she had already advanced to a level 10 strong mutated beast. She had directly broken through the settings. This was the most terrifying thing. However, it was obvious that this hell python was still not satisfied. The enormous mouth on its enormous head opened, and it was still in Wei's enchanting female voice that emanated from it. But at this time, in this situation, this female voice didn't make people feel that it was charming at all. Instead, it made people's hair stand on end. She stared at Immortality and said, "I heard that you can transform into a giant dragon? Just right, I need the giant dragon's blood to complete the final evolution. When I get your blood, I will break through level 10 strong mutated desolate beast and become a super mutated desolate beast. At that time, the entire flaming beginning continent will be mine." The more she spoke, the crazier she became. Her huge face was full of malevolence. As she spoke, the ground around her began to rapidly turn into magma. At first, it was only 5 meters on both sides of her body. But soon, the magma's range rapidly expanded. 10 meters, 20 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters, and it continued to expand. On the ground, almost all the buildings, humans, and snakes were swallowed by the magma. This was the most terrifying thing about the hell python. It could turn the ground within a certain range into magma. This range expanded as the hell python's strength increased. And for a 5-kilometer-long hell python like this, the magma it could create could reach a radius of more than 50 kilometers. And within the magma's range, all teleportation skills would be ineffective. Within 100 kilometers of the center of the magma, all flying skills would be ineffective. At this time, the magma's range was rapidly extending toward Immortality. Seeing this, Immortality retreated while summoning the sea dragon clone. At this point, only the sea dragon clone could suppress the giant python of hell. Soon the sea dragon clone appeared. Now that Immortality had advanced to a level 8 desolate hunter, the sea dragon clone had also become a level 8 strong mutated desolate beast. Its body length had also reached 1,800 meters. Although it wasn't as long as the hell python, its appearance was ferocious and full of majesty. At the same time, the long way on its body spread out. This made the giant python of hell unconsciously feel a trace of fear in its heart. Most importantly, although the sea dragon clone was above the magma, it didn't seem to be affected by the magma at all. It floated there out of thin air. Its body was winding and full of oppression. Chapter 482. Although the sea dragon clone was above the magma, it wasn't affected by the magma at all. On the contrary, it was full of oppression. The python of hell couldn't help but feel some fear in its heart. However, this fear not only didn't make it recover, but also made it a little angry. On this planet, it was the absolute king. It wouldn't allow another existence stronger than itself to appear. Fortunately, it could feel that although this creature was powerful, its aura was only that of a strong level 8 mutated beast. It was 2 levels lower than itself. Thinking of this, it suddenly raised its head. It roared to the sky. Roar! In the next moment, a stream of magma spurted out. It attacked the sea dragon clone. However, the sea dragon clone's figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. When it reappeared, it was already behind the python of hell. The python of hell was shocked. The spatial restrictions within the range of its magma had no effect on this creature at all. The sea dragon clone didn't wait for the python of hell to react and slashed at the back of the python of hell. Swish! The giant claws slashed, and a huge crack hundreds of meters long and about 20 meters wide suddenly appeared on the back of the python of hell. Puff, puff, puff! In this huge crack, boiling magma suddenly rolled out. The python of hell immediately let out a miserable roar. At the same time, its body rolled, trying to grab the sea dragon clone. However, the sea dragon clone was extremely agile. It quickly circled around the python of hell several times in a row. At the same time, it spat out a bluish-white dragon breath from its mouth. This bluish-white dragon breath was directly sprayed at the wound on the python of hell's back. Boom! The bluish-white dragon breath instantly entered the huge wound. At this moment, the magma in the python of hell's body was extinguished at an extremely fast speed and was frozen. One had to know that the python of hell's body was 5,000 meters long, which showed how much magma there was in its body. However, as soon as the sea dragon clone's dragon breath was released, all the magma within its 5,000-meter-long body was extinguished. In a very short period of time, it was all frozen. At this moment, Emoshur's dragon will moved. Whoosh, the python of hell's body, which was frozen for 5,000 meters, suddenly shattered with a bang. It scattered all over the ground. In the distance, the few survivors who saw this were extremely shocked. The giant python, which was more than 5,000 meters long, died in less than a minute after it had appeared. It was true that the more handsome one's appearance, the faster one's death. Emoshur nodded at this moment. The combat strength of the sea dragon clone was far beyond his imagination. No one's will who was 2 levels higher than him. However, although this was unexpected, it was also reasonable. Although the sea dragon clone wasn't a real dragon, its skills were basically the same as Emoshur's. Emo dragon breath's dragon breath as moreover, the profound ice dragon breath it spat out was the breath of a real dragon. Python of the python of hell was an ordinary creature, assessed. Of the python of SST to the of the S of the est. Emoshur, however, used his dragon will to scan the area. Bang 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 bang, the T. S for Emoshur's kill points, they soared once again. In the end, his kill points stopped at more than 1.5 billion. At this time, with him as the center, a circle of death had formed within a radius of 50 kilometers. All of the snake tribe members within this area had already exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Emoshur took one last look at this place, then turned and entered the teleportation hall. The remaining survivors made up about 1/3 of the total number of people. Seeing this, they hurriedly followed him into the teleportation hall. In the teleportation hall, they all kept a distance from Emoshur. They were afraid that if they were careless and made this powerhouse unhappy, they would not even know how they died. A moment later, Emoshur arrived at Hunting Island number 20. The owner of Hunting Island number 20 had already seen what happened on the Python of Hellstar on the surveillance screen. He saw the snake disaster on the Python of Hellstar with his own eyes. He saw the base being breached. He saw the disciples who went to the Python of Hellstar suffering heavy casualties. He was already in despair. One must know that these disciples were the disciples of the top forces on the continent. Although they had signed a life and death contract before going to the Python of Hellstar. If anything happened to them on the Python of Hellstar, it would have nothing to do with Hunting Island number 20. However, these big sects were often very domineering. If something happened to their disciples, they would not care about the contract. Moreover, if they were out in the wild, it would still make sense. However, if something happened in the base, Hunting Island number 20 would have a lot to do with it. Therefore, he had been praying that someone could bring these people back. Even if they could not bring all of them back, at least some of them would do. Fortunately, he saw Emoshur's powerful attack later. He destroyed all the snakes. Although he could not save everyone, he saved 1/3 of them. This was already a blessing in disguise for him. Therefore, he immediately came to the teleportation hall of Hunting Island number 20. When Emoshur walked out, he bowed deeply to Emoshur. He said, "Mr. Mo, thank you. You are the benefactor of Hunting Island number 20. Emoshur nodded and did not say much. He said again, "Mr. Mo, if you need my help in the future, just let me know. Hunting Island number 20 will not refuse." Emoshur still only nodded. At this time, the island master of Hunting Island number 20 had the intention to get close to Emoshur. Obviously, Emoshur was the person who destroyed the entire dragon clan. With such terrifying strength, it was inevitable that he could easily crush any powerhouse on the continent. If he could get close to such a person, no matter what he did in the future, it would be smooth sailing. However, his idea was destined to fail. Emoshur did not give him a chance to get close to him. He directly teleported away and left Hunting Island number 20. The island master of Hunting Island number 20 was slightly stunned. Then, he smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. Were all powerful people so cold and aloof? However, although the other party did not pay much attention to him, he did not complain at all. Firstly, he did not dare. Secondly, the other party had helped him save 1/3 of the experiencers. It could be said that he was indebted to Emoshur, so how could he possibly blame him? At the same time, those people who were saved by Emoshur also engraved Emoshur's face in their minds. After they returned, they must report this to the higher-ups in the sect as soon as possible. They must remind all the disciples in the sect not to offend this person if they met him in the future. Chapter 483. After Emoshur returned to Hunting Island number 1, he began his leisurely life again. This time it was truly leisurely. The sea dragon clone's strength could already kill a level 10 mutant beast. This meant that Emoshur was already the strongest existence on the flaming continent. In the entire Flaming Continent he was the peak of combat strength. In the entire Flaming Continent, no one could threaten him with combat strength alone. Therefore he was qualified to rest for a while. As for his next stop after resting, he had already thought about it. He would go to Hunting Island number 22 or even Hunting Island number 23. There were many strong mutant wild beasts there. Now, every time he killed a strong mutant beast he would get 10 kill points. Therefore it was the most cost-effective to go there. Just as Mo was resting, his deeds had already spread among the powerful sects on the Flaming Continent. The strongest sect on the Flaming Continent, the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect. In the meeting hall, 5 disciples were standing at the center. On the left and right sides of the hall were the elders of the sect. On the main seat sat the sect master who had been in seclusion for a long time and had just come out. All of them were looking up at a 3-dimensional projection in the center of the hall. This projection was Mo. This was drawn by the previous artist according to the descriptions of the disciples and made into a 3-dimensional image. Sect master, this is what happened. A disciple said. The whole hall was silent for a moment. An elder finally said, Sect master, based on the current situation, we should try our best to link this Mr. Mo to the mysterious expert who slaughtered the entire dragon clan. Another elder nodded. Indeed. This Mr. Mo is very likely the person who slaughtered the entire dragon clan. Based on this, we should try our best to be careful of this Mr. Mo. If we can befriend him, then we should. If we can't, try your best to tell the disciples not to provoke this Mr. Mo. The sect master pondered for a moment and nodded. Send this 3-dimensional image to all the disciples and tell them to avoid this person in the future. Try not to provoke him. If they provoke him, they will bear the consequences. The sect won't stand up for them. When the 5 disciples below heard this, they were all stunned. In the entire Flaming Continent, the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect was known as the top ancient sect. It was a sect that had been passed down since the era of the Great Dragons and had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. In other words, the Dragon Clan was the only one who could suppress them. However, the Dragon Tribe had always been residing in the Dragon Valley and had no intention of expanding outwards. That was why the Ancient Flame Sect was known as the #1 sect on the Flaming Dawn Continent. As such, no one on the Flaming Dawn Continent dared to provoke them. On the other hand, if the disciples of the Ancient Flame Sect were to cause trouble outside, the people of the other forces could only bear with it. Moreover, the flame-beginning ancient sect was famous for being protective. If their disciples were bullied, they would stand up for them. If their disciples bullied others, they would still stand up for them. Because of this, the Flame Dawn ancient sect was secretly known as the Protective Sect. But today the sect master had passed down an order. If you provoke this person, you will have to bear the consequences. The sect wouldn't stand up for these disciples. How could they not be surprised? But thinking about it, it made sense. In the face of an existence that could easily slaughter the Dragon Valley, the Ancient Flame Sect had no choice but to retreat. If that ancestor didn't come to provoke them, they would be lucky enough to have smoke rising from their ancestral graves. How could they dare to provoke others? Yes. 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 The 5 disciples cupped their fists in response. At the same time, the second-ranked Ancient Dragon Sect had also passed Mo.'s portrait to all their disciples. At the same time they passed down an order. All disciples were not to provoke this person. Those who disobeyed would have to bear the consequences. The third-ranked Mystic Moon Sect had also passed Mo.'s portrait to all their disciples. At the same time they passed down an order. All disciples were not to provoke this person. Those who disobeyed would be expelled from the sect. Among the top 50 sects, half of them had passed down such an order. At the same time, these sects forbade their disciples from spreading this news. If they caused the displeasure of an expert, then it wouldn't be a personal matter. There was a high chance that their sect would be directly destroyed. At this moment, Mo didn't know any of this. Now that he was theoretically the strongest person on the Flaming Dawn continent, he could relax in peace. He planned to give himself a 3-month vacation. After 3 months, he would go to the 21st or 22nd hunting island. During the vacation he couldn't always stay on the island. Now that he was theoretically the strongest person on the Flaming Dawn continent, of course he had to take him around and admire the various wonders of the Flaming Dawn continent. He wanted to admire the colorful world of the Flaming Dawn continent. First, they planned to go to the far east of the continent to admire the sunrise on the Eastern Sea. The sunrise on the Eastern Sea was the best place to admire the sunrise on the Flaming Dawn continent. The magnificent sunrise there was also one of the most famous wonders on the Flaming Dawn continent. On this day, Mo Shi had already teleported to an island on the Eastern Sea, East Pole Island. Those who came to admire the sunrise would basically come to East Pole Island. There was a tall mountain on East Pole Island called East Pole Mountain. This East Pole Mountain was the best place to admire the sunrise on the entire Flaming Dawn continent. Of course, East Pole Mountain was divided into 9 levels of observation platforms. The lowest level was where ordinary people could admire the sunrise for free. Further up, the second level was the observation platform for officials. The third level was the observation platform for hunters. The fourth level was the observation platform for third-rate sections. The fifth level was the observation platform for second-rate sections. The eighth level was the observation platform for first-rate sections. The ninth level was for the upper echelons of first-rate sects, and they had to be Grand Desolate Masters or above. Only by satisfying these 2 requirements could one ascend. In the entire continent, there were only a handful of people who were qualified to ascend to the first level of the observation platform. Mo Shi arrived at the foot of East Pole Mountain and asked about the situation. He didn't care. He directly brought Happy to a 5-star hotel to check in. At around 4 o'clock the next morning, he and Happy woke up early and arrived at East Pole Mountain. There was an almighty senior who had set up a seal on East Pole Mountain. They couldn't fly or teleport, so they could only walk up the mountain. The 2 of them arrived at the observation platform at the lowest level. The observation platform here was huge, occupying an area the size of dozens of soccer fields. However, even such a huge observation platform was already packed with people. Mo Shi held Happy's hand, and under everyone's envious gazes, they slowly climbed up the stairs by the side. Soon they arrived at the second level. The second level was the observation platform for officials. One had to show an official certificate to enter. The people on the observation platform were all very dignified. The officials who could come to East Pole Island weren't minor officials. However, Mo Shi didn't care. He pulled Happy up the stairs. The third level was the observation platform for desolate hunters. There weren't many desolate hunters on the Flaming Dawn continent. Therefore, the observation platform here was much smaller, and there weren't many people here. Happy gestured to Mo Shi, "Let's do it here." Mo Shi shook his head and lowered his head. "No matter what it is, I'll give you the best. So let's go to the top level." Chapter 484. No matter what it was, Mo Shi wanted to give Happy the best. Therefore he said to Happy, "Let's go to the top floor." At this moment, on the stone steps leading to the top floor, a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 40s was slowly walking up the stairs. She was dressed in white and looked like a fairy. When the disciples of the first-rate sects on the 8th floor saw this person, their eyes were filled with envy. "What a fairy! Who is she?" "Keep your voice down. Those who are qualified to go to the top floor are the upper echelons of the first-rate sections. They are either sect leaders or elders. Moreover, they have to be Grand Desolate Masters." Hiss. "So, she must be the upper echelon of a large sect." "I know her. She is the sect leader of the third-ranked Mystic Moon female sect, Qian Xianyue. No wonder she's the third-ranked sect. I heard that sect leader Qian has lived for more than 800 years and has already reached level 7 Grand Desolate Master. So strong?" With Qian Xuanyue's strength, she could naturally hear the discussions of these disciples. However, she did not care. She came here today to reminisce. When she was young, this mountain did not have any restrictions. When she was watching the sunrise on the top floor of this mountain, she met a young man by chance. From then on, the two fell in love. Later, when she was in danger, the young man fell into thousands of ice caves and died in order to save her. Since then, she would come here every year to watch the sunrise on this day. At this moment, she came to the entrance of the top floor of the observation platform. A desolate hunter who was in charge of guarding the entrance of the observation platform saw Qian Xianyue walking up step by step. He hurriedly greeted her and said, "Sect leader Qian, you're here. Please come in." As he spoke, he bent down and made a respectful gesture. Qian Xianyue was an expert of the third-ranked sect on the continent, so these guards would naturally be respectful to her. Qian Xianyue nodded slightly and then entered the observation platform. She was the only one on the top floor of the observation platform. She walked to the leftmost position and sat on the bench that she was used to. She silently looked at the horizon that had just turned white. The guards were whispering to each other. "Who was that just now? Why are you so respectful to her?" It was obvious that the guard who asked the question was new. The guard from before said, "Didn't you receive training before taking up the post?" The people on the top floor are basically the sect masters and elders of first-rate sects. You have to recognize all of them. The guard who asked the question smiled awkwardly and said, there are indeed a lot of people. In the top 10 sects, there are 10 sect masters and over 100 elders. Another guard next to him glared at him and said, that's right. No matter how many things there are, you have to remember them. These people are all big shots and we can't afford to offend any of them. She was the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect, Chen Shenyue, a level 7 desolate hunter. It said that her strength can be ranked in the top 5 in the entire continent. Hiss! The guard who asked the question sucked in a breath of cold air. A guard next to him said, so you'd better go back and do more homework. Otherwise you might lose your head if you're not careful. Moving my head is a small matter, but implicating your entire family is a big matter. The guard who asked the question nodded repeatedly. Okay, I'll record everyone's names when I get back today. While they were talking, Sure and Happy also walked up the mountain path. When the guards saw them, they took a few careful glances. They didn't know these two people. However, this girl was very beautiful. Even so, they still stopped Sure and Happy. I'm sorry, no trespassing is allowed on the observation deck on the top floor. An old guard said. However, although he used the words, I'm sorry, he didn't mean it at all. Instead, his tone was very tough. Sure originally wanted to talk to them nicely. However, they were so rude and unreasonable as soon as they came up. Sure didn't need to indulge them. His voice was slightly cold as he said, we're all here to enjoy the sunrise. There's no need to divide them into ranks. Aren't you being too unreasonable by doing this? That guard chuckled twice. Unreasonable? You're right. In the East Pole, the island master is the reason. This is the rule of the island master, so we have to follow the rules. The other guard waved his hand impatiently and shooed Sure away as if he was shooing away a fly. Go, go, go. Go to wherever it's cool. Sure sneered. He was just about to make a move to scare these people. However, at this moment, Chen Shenyue heard the noise. She couldn't help but turn her head. When she turned her head, she saw a familiar face. Her heart skipped a beat. She had never seen the owner of this face before. However, she couldn't be more familiar with this face. This was the person that the disciples sent back a few days ago. The person who could summon a powerful creature and destroy a level 10 mutated desolate beast. Moreover, it was very likely that he was the one who slaughtered the entire Dragon Valley. The Mystic Moon sect had also done an investigation. This person's name was Sure, the island master of Hunting Island No. 1. And he had an even more domineering title, Dragon Lord. Although she didn't know why some of his subordinates called him Dragon Lord, he was able to destroy the Dragon Valley that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years by himself. It was not an exaggeration to call him Dragon Lord. Thinking of this, she quickly stood up and walked to the entrance. She said, Greetings, Dragon Lord. This was the first time she met Sure. She didn't know whether to call him Dragon Lord or Island Master Mo. However, after thinking about it, the title Dragon Lord was more domineering than Island Master Mo. Perhaps he would like this title more. Sure was a little surprised. He looked at the woman from head to toe. He was sure that they didn't know each other. He asked, You are? Chen Shenyue hurriedly introduced herself with a smile. Oh, I'm the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect, Chen Shenyue. Sure was puzzled. Do we know each other? Chen Shenyue shook her head and said, We haven't met before, but Island Master Mo Dragon Lord, your name is like thunder to my ears. The guards next to them were all a little confused. Chen Shenyue was definitely one of the top people on the continent. She was ranked in the top 5 in terms of strength. But now she was so respectful to this young man. Could it be that this young man was stronger than her and had a higher status than her? However, no matter how hard the guards racked their brains, they couldn't think of such a young man in the top 5. Seeing that the guards were still in a daze, Chen Shenyue couldn't help but frown slightly. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and invite the Dragon Lord in. She was actually doing this out of kindness. This Dragon Lord was a vicious and merciless person. He had slaughtered so many people in the Dragon Valley. He had also killed so many snakes on the Hell Python Star. Moreover, it was said that when he saw the disciples of the various sects in trouble, he had no intention of saving them. In the end, he had saved 1/3 of them unintentionally. From this, it could be seen how hard-hearted this Dragon Lord was. In the face of such a person, if he was unhappy, it was very likely that he would casually kill these guards. Chapter 485. Chen Shenhua seemed to be reprimanding those guards, but she was actually saving them. Among those guards, the oldest one was a shrewd person. He naturally knew why Chen Shenhua reprimanded them. At the same time, he was even more surprised by Mo Shi's identity. Chen Shenhua didn't even dare to say that she wanted to protect them directly. Instead, she reprimanded them. It could be seen that this person's status was definitely above Chen Shuanyue's. Logically speaking, if someone with a high status wanted to enter the top floor, they had to report to the island master of East Pole Island. But at this moment he didn't dare to hesitate at all. He hurriedly stepped aside and apologized. "I'm sorry, Dragon Lord. I was blind to have offended you. Please forgive me, Dragon Lord. Please speak, Dragon Lord." As he spoke, he gestured for them to enter. A young guard next to him wanted to say something. But he was pulled back by another middle-aged guard, so he couldn't say anything. They stepped aside, and Mo Shi couldn't be bothered to argue with them. Happy, he walked into the observation deck. Behind them, the guards looked at each other in dismay. Finally, the young guard spoke in a low voice. "Seniors, those two just now are..." The other guards shook their heads. None of them knew this person. The young guard chuckled and said, "It seems that you haven't done your homework." The guards glared at the young guard. The young guard continued. "Although I don't know who they are, that girl just now is really beautiful. She's definitely the most beautiful and pure girl I've ever seen." As soon as he said that, the other guards broke out in a cold sweat. They quickly turned their heads to look. They saw Mo Shi glancing at them intentionally or unintentionally. Their legs were about to turn to jelly. Based on their experience, a person who even the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect had to treat with respect was either extremely powerful, or he was extremely powerful. For such a person, one's life would be in danger if he looked at his woman. This brat was simply tired of living. "What nonsense are you talking about? Shut your damn mouth. If you want to die, don't drag us down with you." At this moment, the young man also realized that there was something wrong with his words. The clothes on his back were instantly drenched. He glanced at Mo Shi and muttered, Sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm sorry." The few older guards scolded, "That's right. You really don't know how to do things properly. Hurry up and report this to the city lord." They wanted to send the young guard away so that he wouldn't cause any trouble here. But before he could leave, another elderly guard called out to him. "Wait, I'll go with you." This matter was of great importance. He was afraid that if the young man went alone, something would happen. The young man also knew the importance of this matter, so he didn't dare to joke around anymore. He just nodded and said, "Okay." For such a big event, he felt more at ease with an older person by his side. At the same time, on the observation deck, Mo Shi and Happy chose a seat and sat down. Seeing that the eastern sky was getting brighter and brighter, the two of them focused their attention on the eastern horizon. At this moment, the sect master of the Mystic Moon sect, Chen Shenhua, who was sitting not far away from them, was feeling nervous. In this situation, was she a third wheel? Should she leave? But if she left, wouldn't it seem too deliberate? Moreover, the Dragon Lord and Chen Shenhua were obviously in the zone. If she caused any trouble at this time, wouldn't it be too abrupt? Who would have thought that Chen Shenhua, who had lived for more than 800 years, would be so nervous and unable to make up her mind? The contrast between this and her fairy-like appearance was too great. In fact, she couldn't be blamed. Although she had experienced great storms and seen everything, she had something that she cared about. However, she had something she cared about, and that was her entire Mystic Moon female sect. Once a person had something that they cared about, they would be worried about gains and losses when they encountered something. Especially the person in front of her. He could even destroy the Dragon Valley, let alone the Mystic Moon sect. If something went wrong and made him unhappy, it would definitely be a disaster for the entire Mystic Moon sect. Therefore she had to be careful. Mo Shi didn't know what Chen Shenhua was thinking. He originally wanted to try to plunder her memory. However, Chen Shenhua was a full realm higher than him. He tried a few times but he didn't succeed. So he simply stopped plundering. At this moment, the white of the eastern sky had turned light red. Slowly, the range of the light red became larger and larger. In the end, almost the entire eastern sky turned crimson. A moment later, a red dot appeared from where the water met in the east. One could hear someone shouting from the observation deck below, "It's coming out, it's coming out." Mo Shi hugged Happy, and the two of them subconsciously leaned close to each other. Not far away, Chen Shuanyue's eyes gradually became blurry when she saw this scene. She recalled every sunrise that she had watched with that man. A moment later, a red arc gradually rose. It was not like the sunrise on Earth where the sun was so small. The sunrise here was very big. This arc almost occupied the entire sea in the east. Then it was a semicircle. Finally, a red sun that occupied almost half of the sky broke free from the sea and jumped out. The entire eastern sky and sea were dyed red by this huge sun. Looking around, their vision was filled with the sun. This scene was extremely shocking. When the people who were still noisy saw this, they all fell silent for a long time. They were all so shocked that they couldn't speak. When Emoshur and Happy saw the huge red sun, both of them were deeply shocked. After a long time, a thought appeared in Emoshur's mind. He asked, "Happy, do you want to watch such a sunrise every day?" Happy nodded. "Yes." Emoshur said, "Then from now on, we'll watch the sunrise every day in Miniature World." In Miniature World he was a god. It was not difficult for him to create such a sunrise. Of course, Miniature World was still too small for now. He could only create such a sunrise visually. If he wanted to create such a sunrise, he would have to wait until Miniature World was upgraded in the future. After watching the sunrise, Emoshur asked Happy, "Happy? Where else do you want to go? I'll take you there." When Chen Xianyue heard this question, her heart skipped a beat. Hundreds of years ago, that young man had asked her the same question. He had said that he would take her to see all the beautiful scenery in the world. However, thinking of this, Chen Xianyue could not help but hold her breath and wait quietly for Happy's answer. Chapter 486. After hearing Emoshur's question, Chen Xianyue immediately held her breath and waited for Happy's answer. That young man had also asked her the same question. Her answer was that as long as she was with him, she was willing to go anywhere. He wanted to hear if this girl had the same answer as him. However, this girl called Happy did not answer. She just leaned her head on Dragon Lord's shoulder. The two of them just leaned on each other. At this moment, even Chen Xianyue understood what she meant. As long as the two of them were together, she was willing to go anywhere. Chen Xianyue looked at the two of them in a daze. Her thoughts went back to hundreds of years ago, when the two of them leaned on each other and watched the sunrise. Gradually, the gigantic red sun rose higher and lower, and gradually became smaller. The people watching the sunrise also went down the mountain. However, after they went down the mountain, they did not immediately disperse. Instead, they stayed at the foot of the mountain and waited for the people coming down. The ordinary people at the bottom of the mountain went down first. Then they all stopped. After a while, the officials and desolate hunters came down one after another. Look, those are all desolate hunters. Damn, I've lived for a few decades but I've never seen more than 10 hunters. Today I saw so many of them at once. If only I could become a desolate hunter like them. At this moment, someone shouted, "The disciples of the first-rate forces are coming down." Among the first-rate forces today, there are no disciples of the ancient flame sect or the ancient dragon sect. Among the top 10 sects, there are only some female disciples from the Mystic Moon female sect. Mystic Moon female sect? Are they those female disciples who are so beautiful? TSK, they are all beauties. It's really killing me. If I can have a girlfriend like her, even if I die immediately, it will be worth it. Come on, these disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect are not people you can associate with. You have to be a disciple of one of the top 10 first-rate forces. Sigh, I'm just saying. We can only look at these disciples from afar. As they spoke, more than 20 female disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect stood at the foot of the mountain. They were all dressed in white and looked like fairies descending from the clouds. However, at this moment, these fairy-like women were divided into 2 rows at the foot of the mountain, facing the mountain. All of them lowered their heads and bowed respectfully. They seemed to be waiting for someone. From the looks of it, his status should be much higher than theirs. Other than the upper echelons of those first-rate forces, there's probably no one else. Not long after, a woman came down from the mountain. Still dressed in white, he looked like an immortal. After descending the mountain, the group of female disciples all respectfully said, "Sect leader." Only then did everyone realize that they were waiting for their sect master. This is the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect? She is also a great beauty. Damn, I didn't come here in vain. I can actually meet the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect. He's a big shot ranked in the top 5. That's right. How can an ordinary person meet such a big shot in their lifetime? To be able to meet you today, it's definitely a blessing from our ancestors. In the midst of their conversation, a flying car could be seen speeding toward them from afar. After landing, a person got out of the car. Someone recognized him and said, "He is the Island Lord of East Pole Island and also the City Lord of East Pole City. the Island Lord of East Pole Island. He's also a big shot ranked in the top 5 on the Flaming Dawn continent. To be able to meet 2 big shots ranked in the top 5 at once today, it's not just smoke from our ancestors' graves, it's fire. At this moment someone raised a question. I heard that the Island Lord of East Pole Island rarely comes here. Why is he suddenly here today? Yeah, I also heard that the Island Lord of East Pole Island once had a sad past here, so he basically won't come here unless there's something special. Maybe, he heard that the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect is here, so he specially came to welcome her. Now that you put it that way it does make sense. Both of them are ranked in the top 5. Now that the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect has come to his territory, it's normal for him to come out to welcome her. There's nothing wrong with that. In the midst of the discussion, everyone was certain that the Island Lord of East Pole Island was here to welcome Chen Shenyue. At this moment the Island Lord of East Pole Island saw Chen Shenyue and said with a smile, "Sect leader Chen, you're here." Chen Shenyue came once a year so he was not surprised. Chen Shenyue nodded slightly and replied, yes. She had more or less guessed the purpose of the Island Lord's visit. So she did not ask much. As they spoke, 2 people came down from the stone steps on the mountain path. It was a man and a woman. The man had delicate features and the woman was pure and lovely. Someone noticed the 2 of them and could not help but say, F***CK, what a pair of B***cheese. What B***cheese? They're clearly an immortal couple. Yeah, that's what I meant. In my eyes, an immortal couple and a B***cheese are synonymous. You're just envious, jealous and hateful. Yes, you're right. Soon, Mo sure and happy arrived at the foot of the mountain. At this moment the Island Lord of East Pole Island cupped his fists and said, I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know that Island Master Mo would be gracing us with his presence. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. His tone was very respectful. What? What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded. The Island Lord of East Pole Island is here to welcome this young man? Chen Shenyue also said enthusiastically. Dragon Lord, if you have time, please come to our Mystic Moon female sect as a guest. We welcome you at any time. The surrounding people were once again dumbfounded. **CK. So sect master Chen Shenyue is also waiting for him. Everyone thought that the Island Lord was here to welcome Chen Shenyue. They also thought that Chen Shenyue was waiting for the Island Lord. However, they never expected that the Island Lord was actually here to welcome this young man. And Chen Shenyue was also waiting for this young man. Who exactly is he? The Island Lord and sect master Chen Shenyue seem to be very respectful to him. This is truly inconceivable. Even if Guan Songhai, the strongest person on the continent, came, sect master Chen Shenyue and the Island Lord wouldn't be so respectful. Could it be that this young man's strength is very terrifying? That's impossible, right? At this moment, the 20 disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect beside Chen Shenyue looked at Mo Shi's face in shock. Everyone's heart skipped a beat when they saw it. Isn't this the person that the sect has been talking about? The person who can summon a level 10 mutated beast. The person who destroyed the entire dragon clan. Thinking of this, all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect did not even dare to breathe loudly. They were not like the people around them who were still discussing. The more they understood how terrifying a person was, the more cautious they would be in front of this person. Chapter 487. Everyone thought that the East Pole Island Lord was here to welcome Chen Shenyue. But they didn't expect that he was here to welcome this young man. Even Chen Shenyue, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect, which was ranked 3rd on the continent, was welcoming this young man respectfully. One had to know that these 2 people were ranked in the top 5 of the continent. They were the strongest among the strongest. They were definitely big shots. Yet, both of them were so respectful to this young man. They really couldn't figure it out. Mo sure was a little surprised to see both of them welcoming him. He asked the East Pole Island Lord, "Do we know each other?" The East Pole Island Lord had naturally seen Mo Shi's portrait before. He said humbly and respectfully, "Island Lord Mo, you don't know me, but your name resounds like thunder in my ears. Hearing that Island Lord Mo has come to my island, East Pole Island is really honored. Naturally, I have to be the host. Please come to my humble abode and give me a chance to entertain you." Mo Shi turned to look at Happy and asked, "What do you think?" He didn't mind. But if Happy didn't want to go, he naturally didn't want to go either. Happy didn't say anything. He just looked at Mo Shi. His meaning was obvious. If Brother Mo wants to go, Happy can go. If Brother Mo doesn't want to go, Happy can't go. Mo sure raised his head and said to the East Pole Island Lord, "Let's go then." The East Pole Island Lord immediately looked happy. Then he called Qian Shenyue, sect leader Qian, come with us. It'll be more lively with more people. Qian Shenyue nodded. Okay. This surprised the East Pole Island Lord. Qian Shenyue was a little cold and aloof, and she was in a high position. Therefore, she usually didn't get together with others easily. She came to East Pole Island every year to watch the sunrise. In the first few years, the East Pole Island Lord even invited her. But she rejected him every time. Later on, he stopped inviting her. This time, because she was right in front of him, he invited her out of courtesy. He didn't expect her to agree. However, the East Pole Island Lord thought for a while and understood. She was probably afraid that if she didn't agree, it would seem that she wasn't giving Island Lord Mo face. If they really infuriated Island Master Mo, he could easily wipe out the entire Mystic Moon female sect. Soon, the East Pole Island Lord called for 2 flying cars to bring Mo sure and the others away. Mo sure rarely rode in flying cars. He thought it was too slow. Compared to the flying hovershoes, he was already moving at the speed of a turtle. Not to mention his shadow step, which had reached the large success stage. However, he had to admit that this thing was indeed comfortable to sit on. There were no bumps. It was very spacious inside, and one could even stand or lie down. The most important thing was that the facilities were complete. There were entertainment facilities such as computers, toilets, bathrooms, and other living facilities. There were even luxurious flying cars, complete with a gym, a billiard hall, and various other facilities. It was a little too exaggerated. Riding on the flying car, they arrived at the East Pole City Lord's mansion after about 10 minutes. The City Lord's mansion was grand and majestic, and its main color was a fiery red like the sun. It fit the theme of sunrise on East Pole Island. After entering the City Lord's mansion, the East Pole Island Master arranged a banquet to entertain Mo sure. The servants of the City Lord's mansion did not know why the Island Master was so enthusiastic about a young man. The Island Master, as one of the top 5 experts on the continent, had always been proud and arrogant. Even if the top expert came, the Island Master would at most treat him to a cup of tea. But today he was so enthusiastic about this young man. Could it be that this young man's strength was even stronger than the #1 expert? Of course not. But why was the Island Master so enthusiastic about him? They really could not figure it out. However, they knew that since the Island Master treated him so warmly, they naturally did not dare to neglect him. They were all very careful when they served him tea for fear of making a mistake. At the same time, the news had already spread on East Pole Island. There were many foreigners who came to East Pole Island to watch the sunrise. They then spread the news in all directions. The news also spread rapidly on the internet. After all, it was about the 2 top 5 experts. The news spread very quickly. Breaking news. The East Pole Island Master invites a mysterious man as a guest. Even the sect master of the Mystic Moon sect has to bow and greet him. Who has such great respect? 2 of the top 5 experts are so respectful to him. Who is he? Reports with similar titles kept appearing on the homepage of major online platforms. Wang Yi's identity also attracted a lot of speculation. Could he be a hidden expert? I've never heard of him before. Even the top 5 rankers have to be respectful to him. Just how strong is he? Soon, Wang Yi's identity was also dug out. He's the new island master of Hunting Island #1. Wasn't Hunting Island #1 infected? I heard that Hunting Island #1 was infected 2 years ago. Since then, almost no one has been to Hunting Island #1. No, I accidentally saw it on the satellite map. Although most of Hunting Island #1 was infected, it was blood red. But in the central area, there was still green. No matter which hunting island he is the island master of, if he's really that strong, why haven't I heard of him before? Yeah, in the past 2 years, I've barely heard any news about him. Why did he suddenly pop up now? At the same time, in an inn in an ancient city. Han Jianxing was holding a wine jug, pouring wine into his mouth while watching the boats coming and going on the river. At this time, Han Lubai quickly walked in. Dad, look. Han Jianxing put down the wine jug and looked at the news on Han Lubai's multifunctional watch. A moment later, a look of shock appeared in his eyes. Seeing the shock on her father's face, Han Lubai also smiled. For so many years, her father didn't seem to be interested in anything. Other than when he was talking to her, he would have other expressions. At all other times he seemed to be a wastrel. And even if something big happened in front of him, he wouldn't show the slightest hint of surprise. She didn't expect him to show such a shocked expression today. In fact, Han Jianxing couldn't help but be shocked. Just a year ago when he had first met Immortality, this guy had been just a wasteland hunter. In a year, he had reached the point where 2 of the top 5 experts of the Flaming Origin continent greeted him with a smile. This was too exaggerated. But thinking about the strength this kid showed in the ancient land of the dragons, it was reasonable. Even so, he was still shocked. A moment later he slowly said, "It seems that he's the one who destroyed the dragon race." Han Lubai rebuked, "Dad, look at you. Dad, look at you. Why didn't you let me chase after him earlier? Why did you have to let him reach your strength? Now he's already able to make 2 of the top 5 experts bow to him. If I chase after him, how can I be worthy?" Han Jianxing rolled his eyes at his daughter. "You're a girl, can't you be more reserved?" Chapter 488. Immortality stayed in the city lord's mansion for 3 days. During these 3 days he went to watch the sunrise with Happy every day. During these 3 days more and more people rushed here. They all saw the news on the internet and knew that a person that even the East Pole Island Master had to treat with respect had appeared here, so they rushed over to watch the show. One must know that on the Flaming Dawn continent, people like the East Pole Island Master were basically at the top. No matter how strong your other forces were, he wouldn't care about you. Even the government had to be careful in front of him. The only people who could make him lower his head were those who were far stronger than him. If even the top 5 had to lower their heads, how strong would this person be? Who would be stronger if he were compared with the top-ranked ancient sect master of the Flaming Dawn ancient sect? However, these people were destined to return in disappointment. After watching the sunrise for 3 days, Immortality and Happy planned to leave East Pole Island. When they were eating in East Pole City, Immortality asked Happy, "Happy, where are we going next?" Happy still looked at Immortality with his big eyes that seemed to be able to speak. Immortality smiled and said, "I heard that the aurora on North Pole Island is very beautiful. How about we go there to see the aurora?" Happy nodded and still looked at Immortality with his big eyes that seemed to be able to speak. Immortality said, "All right, let's go to North Pole Island now." When the East Pole Island Master heard Immortality's words, he suggested, "If Island Master Immo just wants to see the beautiful scenery, we recently discovered a magnificent place called Sea Heart Waterfall. It's only 1,000 kilometers away from here. Island Master Immo, why don't you go take a look? You definitely won't be disappointed." Sea Heart Waterfall. This was the first time Immortality heard of it. He asked, "What's Sea Heart Waterfall?" The East Pole Island Master said, "It's a deep ring-shaped hole in the vast ocean. The surrounding seawater keeps flowing into the hole, forming a ring-shaped waterfall. That's why it's called Sea Heart Waterfall." When Immortality heard this, he felt that it was strange. He said to Happy, "Let's go take a look then." Happy nodded slightly. The East Pole Island Master said, "Then I'll lead the way for Island Master Immo." As he spoke, he ordered his men to prepare a water airship. He said, "You won't be able to experience the wonderful scenery on the way to the Sea Heart Waterfall if you take a high-altitude airship. You can only feel it when you're close to the surface of the water in an airship." Wang Yi nodded. The airship was about 30 meters long. The facilities inside were also very complete. There was also a driver and 5 service staff. Immortality and the others boarded the airship, and it slowly took off. After rising to a height of about 2 meters, it began to fly close to the surface of the water. Gradually, East Pole Island grew further and further behind them. In the end, East Pole Island turned into a small black dot and disappeared from their sight. At this moment, they were surrounded by a vast ocean. It looked no different from an ordinary sea. Airships mainly relied on particle thrusters to fly, and their speed was very fast, reaching more than 500 kilometers per hour. After flying for about half an hour, the sea in front of them finally began to change. The surface of the sea was no longer dark blue. It was black. It was as black as ink. Traveling on such a sea gave people the feeling that they were traveling on an abyss. It made people panic. The East Pole Island Lord explained to Wang Yi, "Island Lord Immo, we're currently in a place called the Black Sea region. The name of the Black Sea region doesn't sound very good, but it actually has many wonderful features." Immortality tilted his head, waiting for him to explain. However, he didn't explain. He only said, "Island Lord Immo, please take a look." As he spoke, he patted the cockpit door and asked the pilot to open it fully. Then he pointed behind the airship. Behind the airship, on the surface of the Black Sea, a trace could be seen extending into the distance. At this moment, the color of the trace was quietly changing. At first it turned green. It was as green as a blade of grass, and it extended to the horizon in a single year. Then the trace turned green again. Then it turned red, yellow, purple. This mark was constantly changing colors. It was as if it was equipped with neon lights. The East Pole Island Lord took out a handful of something that looked like sand and threw it toward the surface of the water. The surrounding water instantly changed into a variety of colors. And in the water below these colors, there were colorful fishes swimming. When Happy saw this, he couldn't help but open his mouth slightly. His face was full of surprise. When Immortality saw Happy's surprise, he was also in a good mood. They continued to fly forward. They passed by a sea valley in front of them. The so-called sea valley had waves that were hundreds of meters high on both sides. Passing through it was as if they were passing through a canyon. The surprising thing was that the waves that were hundreds of meters high on both sides of the sea valley looked very dangerous, as if they would crash down at any time. But in fact, the waves wouldn't crash down at all. The East Pole Island Lord introduced, "We discovered this more than 50 years ago. We couldn't figure out the principle. That's why we never opened it." After passing through the sea valley, they continued to fly forward for more than an hour. At this moment they heard a rumbling sound coming from ahead. At first the rumbling sound wasn't loud. But as they got closer, the rumbling sound became louder and louder. In the end, it was like a deafening roar of a tsunami. The airship slowly rose. When it was 50 meters high, they finally saw a huge cliff 100 meters in front of them. The sudden appearance of such a huge cliff in the middle of the sea was shocking and novel. Gradually the altitude continued to rise. Only then did they see clearly that it wasn't a cliff. Instead, it was a huge circular waterfall. This huge circular waterfall had a radius of more than 20 kilometers. The surrounding seawater kept pouring into this huge circular hole. The deafening rumbling sound was the sound of seawater pouring into the hole. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, it would be very difficult to imagine that such a huge hole would appear in the middle of the sea. This huge hole was pitch black and deep. It was like a huge eye on the planet, staring at those who dared to peep at it. Even someone as experienced and knowledgeable as Immortality was deeply shocked. As for Happy, she was so shocked that she couldn't speak for a long time. It seemed like she didn't know how to speak in the first place. After a long time, Happy gently tugged at Immortality's clothes. There was some fear in her eyes. Immortality knew that Happy was afraid. He said, "Let's go now." However, Immortality wasn't afraid. Instead, he felt a sense of intimacy from this huge and deep eye. This feeling came out of nowhere. He couldn't help but say in his heart, "System, sign in." Chapter 489. Immortality looked down at the huge circular waterfall in the vast sea from the sky. He suddenly had a feeling. He said in his mind, "System, sign in." The system replied instantly as usual, frowny face, sign in successful. Sign in location, Sea Heart Waterfall. Sign in reward, 1 dragon pool. Immortality was slightly puzzled. Dragon pool? What the hell? He looked at it in his mind. A small item appeared in the storage compartment of the system backpack. Looking carefully, he could see that this small thing looked the same as the huge circular waterfall in front of him. And what was strange was that there was water flowing down from this circular waterfall. At the bottom of the circular waterfall was a deep pool. The bottom of the pool couldn't be seen. There seemed to be black shadows swimming inside. He looked at the item description carefully. Frowny face, dragon pool. Can be used to raise creatures above the Grand Desolate Master level. These creatures can evolve into dragons after a certain period of time in the dragon pool. Different species can evolve into different dragons. Seeing this, Immortality felt like cursing Brother Knife. He had spent so much time, so much energy, suffered so much to evolve into a dragon. But now, as long as he entered the dragon pool, he could evolve into a dragon. It was really a little heart-wrenching. But when he continued to read the introduction, he was relieved. These dragons that evolved through the dragon pool will be 100% loyal to the host. It turned out that he had suffered so much and was going to be the boss after evolving into a dragon. And these guys seemed to evolve very easily as long as they entered the dragon pool. But after they evolved into dragons, they could only be his underlings. Creatures equivalent to the Grand Desolate Master level weren't easy to find in the Flaming Origin continent. He would probably have to go to the hunting grounds after the 20th to find them. However, Immortality planned to take Happy to see the beautiful scenery of this world. So he didn't plan to go for the time being. Immortality looked at the Sea Heart Waterfall. The terrain here was rather strange. He probed with his dragon will. However, after probing about 100 kilometers deep, he couldn't probe any further. It was as if something had stopped his dragon will. At this moment, Mo sure wasn't interested in exploring. Half an hour later, they left the Sea Heart waterfall. They hurried to North Pole Island. They had been on the road for about 3 months. They had seen almost all the scenery along the way. Gradually, as they got closer and closer to the north, the temperature dropped. Of course, with Emosher's current physique, he wasn't afraid of the cold at all. But Happy was afraid. Emosher bought a set of winter clothes for Happy. A thick white cloak, a white scarf and white gloves. A white hat. Dressing up like this gave people a different feeling. 2 days later, they arrived at the North Sea. At this point, a thick layer of ice had formed on the surface of the sea. Emosher scanned the area with his dragon's will, but there was no one there. Emosher teleported to North Pole Island. Although North Pole Island was called an island, it was actually very large. It was said that the area was about the same as Wuxia on Earth. Such a huge area was a world of ice and snow. In this world of ice and snow, other than the white of the ground and the blue of the sky, there were almost no other colors. On the North Pole Island there was a North Pole City. The people living in North Pole City were all gold diggers. These so-called gold diggers weren't real gold diggers, but rather looking for crystal ores. Geologists had long explored this continent. There was a small amount of crystal ores underground, which weren't worth building mines to mine. But there were often small amounts of crystal ores that were washed into the shallow layer of ice and snow by underground rivers, and were discovered by people. Gradually, some poor people who weren't so well off came here to try their luck and see if they could find crystal ores. In the early years, there were really people who were very lucky from time to time and became rich because they found crystal ores. Thus, a large number of people began to flood into North Pole Island to try their luck. They were known as gold diggers. Due to the increasing number of gold diggers, specific residential areas were formed on North Pole Island. In the end, a city was formed here and it was called North Pole City. These people were all poor and didn't have much money to build a city. But they had to resist the wind and snow, and also resist the harassment of some wild beasts. So, they used local materials and cut ice to build a city and houses. Thus, North Pole City was also called Ice City. Emosher and Happy entered Ice City together. When these people looked at him and Happy, their gazes were not very kind. Happy was a little puzzled. She gently tugged at Emosher's sleeve. She meant that they didn't offend these people, so why did they seem to treat them as enemies? He gently patted Happy's hand, indicating that she didn't need to worry. Then he plundered these people's dragon senses. After reading these people's memories, Emosher understood the whole story. It turned out that more than 200 kilometers northeast of North Pole City, the ice layer suddenly collapsed, revealing a huge ice cave. People all went to check the ice cave. What they saw was incredible. On the walls of the ice cave, there were tens of thousands of deep caves. Many people found crystal source ores in these caves. Thus, more and more people rushed into the ice cave. And now, almost every cave had been occupied by people. Some people even fought to seize these caves. So, when they saw outsiders, they thought that they were here to snatch their caves. After understanding this, Emosher shook his head and stopped paying attention to these people. He and Happy found a restaurant. After traveling for more than half a day, they wanted to eat a hot meal. The food here was very simple. Most of it was local desolate beast meat. As for vegetarian dishes, there were almost no vegetarian dishes. After all, it was easy to imagine how difficult it was to grow vegetables in this world of ice and snow. However, the desolate beast meat was cooked very well. Emosher was also hungry. He ate in big mouthfuls. Happy also had a good appetite and ate some. While they were eating, the waiter in the restaurant came over to pour them some water. "Esteemed guest, you're also here for the ice cave, right? Then you're really late. Now all the caves in the ice cave have been occupied." Emosher shook his head and said, "We're only here to admire the aurora borealis." The waiter was stunned. "You traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers just to see the aurora borealis?" Emosher nodded. "Yes." The waiter nodded. "You two are really in a good mood." Emosher knew that the waiter clearly didn't believe him. However, he didn't care. But since the waiter mentioned the ice cave, he planned to go take a look with Happy after they finished admiring the aurora borealis. After all, they had already traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers. If they didn't go take a look, they would have doubts in their hearts. What was in the ice cave? Chapter 490. 490, Aurora. The next morning before dawn. Immortality and Happy arrived at the east side of East Pole City. At this moment, a green light screen seemed to be hanging down from the sky. And this light screen was still shaking. After a while, the light screen gradually turned blue, alternating between blue and green. In the dark blue night sky, the light screen was shaking faster and faster. It was as if the fairies in the sky were washing muslin. After a while, the light screen calmed down. Immortality turned to look at Happy. He saw that Happy seemed to be very shocked. When she was on Earth, most of her childhood memories were spent in the base. After coming to the Flaming Continent, she basically lived on Hunting Island 1. She had never seen such a magical scene. Behind them, on the city wall of East Pole City, a few guards looked at Immortality and Happy's backs from afar and discussed. They can't really be here to see the aurora, right? You're talking nonsense. Have you ever heard of someone running hundreds of thousands of kilometers just to see the aurora? I think it's strange too, but if they want to rob those ice caves, why don't they hurry up and go there instead of wasting time here? Who knows what they're up to? Anyway, they definitely don't have good intentions. Happy seemed to like the aurora. So Immortality stayed in North Pole City for a few more days. He watched the aurora for 5 days. And during these 5 days the ice cave also changed. It was said that several major forces of the Flaming Continent had already sent people to take a look. Finally, on the 6th day, the 3 most powerful forces of the Flaming Continent, the Ancient Flame Sect, the Ancient Dragon Sect, and the Mystic Moon Sect, had already sent a large number of disciples to North Pole Island. After coming to North Pole Island, they didn't go to North Pole City, but went directly to the huge ice cave. The 3 sects were basically led by one of their elders. Each sect sent 200 to 300 people. When the gold diggers saw the people of the 3 sects arrive, they all subconsciously retreated. And none of the gold diggers dared to say a word. Although they were unhappy in the face of the 3 most powerful forces of the Flaming Continent, what did they dare to say? Did they not want to live anymore? The first-ranked elder of the Flame Origin Ancient Sect extended his hand and gestured to the other 2 sections. They wanted the 2 sects to make the announcement. However, the elders of the 2 sects returned the greeting and made an inviting gesture at the same time. The 2 sects did not dare to be arrogant in front of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect. The elder of the Ancient Flame Sect nodded his head. What he meant was that since that was the case, he would gladly oblige. Although he didn't intend to give in, he still had to be polite on the surface. Then he turned to the last disciple of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect leader and said, "Jioping, you do it." Jioping was the sect master's personal disciple. He was also the next sect master who was appointed by the sect master. Nowadays the sect master rarely showed himself. The affairs of the sect were all handled by a few elders. And now these elders are consciously pushing Jioping out. Now that he had reached the Grand Desolate Master level, it was time for him to slowly take over the Flame-beginning Ancient Sect. That Jioping had a handsome appearance, and he looked refined and courteous, like a modest gentleman. He didn't have the arrogance of the disciples of the other sections. He cupped his fists and bowed to the thousands of gold diggers present. Then he said, "Everyone, it's a good thing that you found Crystal Sorcerer in this cave. Our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect is also happy to see everyone become rich. However, a few days ago the experts of our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate and Mystic Moon Female Sect have analyzed these caves and found that there is a certain gas element inside. This gas element has never appeared in our Flame Dawn continent before. According to our research, this gas is extremely unstable and can easily explode. Furthermore, this gas came from a hunting ground called Earth." When the gold diggers heard this, they were all shocked. From a hunting ground? How was that possible? One had to know that in theory the gas from Earth could have been brought to the Flame Dawn continent by humans. However, it was impossible for it to appear in this cave. Therefore, there must be something fishy about this. Jioping paused and looked at the gold diggers around him. Then he continued, "Therefore, our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate and Mystic Moon Female Sect plan to work together to find out what dangers are in this cave. Before we figure out the dangers in this cave, it's best for everyone to stay away from this ice cave." The gold diggers looked at each other. In the end, a few gold diggers said, "In that case, the 3 sects are also thinking about everyone's safety. We thank the 3 sections." Saying this, he cupped his fists towards the 3 sects and slowly left. With the first, the second and third were simple. Then more and more gold diggers turned and left. Of course, they didn't believe Jioping's words. These gold diggers couldn't survive in other places on the Flame Dawn continent, so they came to the North Pole Island. They had experienced the coldness of human nature and seen all kinds of people. They naturally knew that Jioping's words were just empty words. In fact, the three sects clearly knew that there were many caves here and that there were many crystal source ores in these caves, so they wanted to take over these caves. They made it sound dignified, but they were actually a bunch of bandits. However, in front of the three sects, no one dared to resist. They could only grit their teeth and swallow it down. The disciples of the three sects watched as the gold diggers around them gradually left. Although they didn't say anything, their faces were expressionless. However, their eyes revealed a hint of pride. This was the strength of the three great sections. This was the pride of the disciples of the three sections. In the entire Flame Dawn continent, no faction dared to fight against the three sections. It was also at this time that Immortality and Happy arrived. When they saw the gold diggers slowly leaving, Happy was a bit puzzled. Immortality casually plundered the memories of one of the gold diggers and understood the whole story. He shook his head slightly but didn't care. In this world there were many hardships. He wasn't the parents of these gold diggers, nor was he their friend. He had no obligation to stand up for them. If he had to intervene every time he encountered injustice, then he wouldn't be able to do anything in his life. At this time, one of the gold diggers saw that Immortality and Happy were still going forward. He sneered and muttered to himself, "The three sects have already taken over the catacombs, and there are still people looking for trouble." Some people even stopped and turned to look at Immortality's back. They were waiting to see Immortality make a fool of himself. Chapter 491. Who the hell is he? The gold diggers saw Immortality and Happy walking against the flow of people to the edge of the ice cave. They all sneered inwardly. It was obvious that the three great sects knew that there was a crystal source ore in the ice cave, so they wanted to occupy it. These two people actually still wanted to go over. This was clearly looking for trouble. Especially when they saw that this guy had brought along such a beautiful and innocent girl, they were even more displeased. How could such a brainless guy have a girlfriend? God must be blind. Yeah, a guy like him deserves to be single for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter if he goes looking for trouble, but it'll be a pity if he ends up hurting that girl. While these people discussed among themselves, Immortality dragged Happy to the edge of the ice cave. At the edge of the ice cave, a few disciples of the ancient dragon sect were secretly pleased when they saw that the gold diggers had no choice but to turn around and leave in front of the three great sections. However, at this moment, they saw two youngsters walking against the flow of people toward them. They could not help but sneer. Were these two people trying to challenge the prestige of the three great sects? An ancient Dragon Gate disciple shouted from 20 meters away. The three great sects are conducting business, so all unrelated people should make way. Don't you know? Immortality smiled faintly when he heard this. The three great sects are so domineering. The disciples of the ancient dragon sect had originally thought that the two of them would retreat in fear after hearing the names of the three great sections. Unexpectedly, this guy knew that they were the three great sects, yet he still dared to confront them directly. Was he crazy? Those disciples were a little angry at this time, and walked towards Immortality's side. A disciple said coldly, "Who do you think you're talking to?" Just as he said this, his voice suddenly paused. It was as if someone had grabbed him by the neck when he was halfway through his sentence. When the others saw this disciple's strange behavior, they were somewhat puzzled. "What's wrong?" Only then did the disciple open his mouth and point at Immortality. He is... Before he could finish speaking, the other ancient Dragon Gate disciples saw Immortality's face clearly. Suddenly he was shocked, as if thunder had exploded in his heart. Their gazes had been fixed on Happy, and they did not pay much attention to Immortality. This was practically the nature of every normal man. At this moment they finally saw Immortality's face. Yes. Island Master Immo. This. When they recognized Immortality, they immediately felt that a disaster was imminent. After all, the sect had issued an order. He ordered all disciples not to provoke Island Master Immo. If they offended Island Master Immo, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. The sect would have nothing to do with them. There were even disciples who privately spread rumors that if they really offended this Island Master Immo, the sect would directly clean up the sect in order to avoid attracting trouble. They didn't know what kind of ability this Mr. Immo had to make the higher-ups of the sect so afraid. But from this, it could be seen that this Island Master Immo was definitely not simple. And now, the few of them had actually offended Island Master Immo. How could they not be terrified? Amidst the panic, a disciple was the first to react. He hurriedly walked towards Immortality, bowed deeply and said, "I'm sorry, Island Master Immo. I was blind and didn't recognize you. I'm really sorry for offending you." The few people behind him also reacted. They took a few steps forward and apologized to Imo. "Alan Master Imo, we were blind. Please forgive us." Imo sneered and said, "Aren't the three great sects very domineering? Why did they suddenly change their masks?" Although the few people were mocked by Imo, they did not dare to slight him in the slightest. They all lowered their heads. Sorry. We were wrong. We should have been slapped." As they spoke, they actually started slapping themselves. As long as Island Master Imo mentioned the mistakes that they had committed in front of their sect's upper echelons, they would very likely be expelled from their sect. In the distance, the gold diggers who were originally retreating were planning to laugh at Imo. But when they saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. "Look at those ancient dragon sect disciples. What's going on? Slapping themselves? Damn, are they stupid? These are ancient dragon sect disciples. Isn't it too embarrassing for them to slap themselves?" While they were shocked, they couldn't help but shift their gaze to Imo. They had thought that Imo was looking for trouble. He might even be seeking his own death. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that the ancient Dragon Gate disciples would slap themselves when they saw them. Even if these gold diggers scratched their heads, they still couldn't figure out the reason behind it. At this moment, Imo saw that the ancient dragon sect disciples were slapping themselves, but he didn't stop them. He no longer paid any attention to them and directly walked past them. The ancient dragon sect disciples didn't dare to stop. It was only when Imo and Happy were far away that the strength they used to slap themselves slowly lessened. In the end, when Imo and Happy's figures were blocked by an ice hill, they came to a stop. At this moment, their cheeks were red and swollen. They were also a little dazed by their own slaps. They looked at each other. After a while, an ancient dragon sect disciple asked, "What should we do?" The moment this question was asked, they fell into silence again. What should they do? What could they do now? They could only listen to orders. The hearts of these people were all in a state of uneasiness. At this moment, someone suddenly remembered, "Hurry up and tell the sect about Island Master Mo's arrival. Perhaps this can be considered as making up for our mistakes." Therefore, they hurriedly contacted their uncle masters. When their martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled. They asked, "Are you sure it's Island Master Mo?" Those people replied, "We didn't dare to verify his identity. However, he looks exactly the same as Island Master Mo's portrait that was passed down by the sect." When those martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled again. One of them said, "Did you offend him?" Those people's voices were much lower. We didn't mean to. We didn't recognize him at all." When those martial uncles heard this, they said, "You're on your own." With that, they hung up the call. They looked at each other in dismay once again. It's over. It's really over this time. Even their martial uncles said so. Weren't they really finished? At this moment, those martial uncles quickly reported this matter to the ancient dragon sect's elders. The ancient dragon sect's elders immediately notified the elders of the flame-beginning ancient sect and the mystic moon sect. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the three major sects were on high alert. Under such circumstances, Imo and Happy slowly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. More than 1,000 people were present, but no one made a sound. Imo was a little confused. What was going on? Chapter 492. When Imo and Happy crossed an ice hill and appeared in front of the crowd. The crowd of more than 1,000 people actually stood in an orderly manner, all of them silently and solemnly. Not a single person uttered a single word. Imo was a little surprised. However, after casually plundering the memories of two people to check, he knew the reason for this. They knew that he was coming. At this moment, three elders who looked to be in their 70s or 80s walked quickly towards Imo. Two of them were men and one was a woman. The men were wearing the sect master robes of the ancient dragon sect and the flame dawn ancient sect. The woman was wearing a white robe with gray patterns on her sleeves. Obviously, she was an elder of the mystic moon female sect. They walked quickly to Imo's side and said, "I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know that Island Master Imo would be coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. I heard that a disciple offended Island Master Imo. Island Master Imo, please tell us what you want to do with them. It's time for our ancient Flame Dawn sect to reorganize our sect." Imo did not pursue the matter. He only wanted to teach those people a lesson. There was no need to harp on it. After all, his current strength was second to none in the Flame Dawn continent. If he still harped on a few small fries like before, he would be too petty. He shook his head and asked, "Have the three sects found anything in this ice cave?" The three of them looked at each other. The elder from the Mystic Moon female sect spoke first. We didn't find anything substantial. However, there are unknown gases in all the caves. We've done some preliminary research on the unknown gases, but we haven't come to any conclusions yet. Mosher didn't want to expose their true purpose. He only asked, "Do you mind if I go down and take a look?" The elders of the three sects did not dare to mind at all. No matter how unwilling they did not dare to show it on their faces. "Of course, please go ahead, Island Master Emo." "However, Island Master Emo, we haven't explored the end of these caves. There might be danger inside, so for your safety, don't go too far after entering these caves." Mosher nodded and said, "Island Master Emo, got it." Then with a thought, a person that looked exactly like Mosher began to materialize beside him. At first it was bones. The bones quickly extended and formed a complete human skeleton. Then muscles and blood vessels appeared on the skeleton. There was also a heart in his chest. Finally, the skin covered the body. It formed a human being. A human that was exactly the same as Mosher. This was Mosher's virus clone. In the past, the virus clones could only be formed from the flesh and blood of infected people. But now, Mosher could already induce the virus, and then make the virus quickly divide and replicate. In the end, a complete individual was formed. When the crowd saw Mosher's method, they realized that he had created an exact replica of himself out of thin air. Furthermore, this person could blink and walk. It was no different from the main body. This made them all widen their eyes. What kind of godly method was this? However, this was only the beginning. Then the second, the third, the fourth, the 100th. A total of 100 doppelgangers were formed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Creating a doppelganger out of thin air was already shocking enough. Now, he had actually created 100 doppelgangers. This was simply not something that a human could do. After that, Mosher gave the order. Go. The 100 doppelgangers immediately jumped out of the large ice cave. Then they randomly jumped into the caves on the walls of the ice cave. When the elders of the three major sects saw this, they all cried bitterly in their hearts. But they did not even dare to fart. Not to mention other things, just the method of creating 100 doppelgangers out of thin air was unheard of. In the face of such an expert, what else did they dare to say? Even if they knew that this expert was here for the crystal source ores, they did not dare to say anything. Mosher controlled the 100 doppelgangers and entered the 100 caves around the ice cave. These caves as a whole went downwards. They went deeper and deeper. After walking for more than 500 meters, his doppelgangers discovered that crystal source ores began to appear on the ground. At first there were not many crystal source ores. They only appeared on the walls occasionally. After walking for another 5 kilometers, there were more and more crystal source ores. There were already specks of crystal source ores on the walls, as many as the stars in the sky. After walking for more than 10 kilometers, there were even more crystal source ores. On the ground and on the ice walls on both sides. Furthermore, the top of his head was filled with crystal source ores. The crystal source ores emitted a fluorescent light, illuminating the entire cave green. Mosher had read some information about crystal source ores before. However, those crystal source ores were basically within 1 cubic meter. If there were 10 crystal source ores, it would be considered a very high-quality crystal source ores. Now, these crystal source ores were basically all over the walls of the cave. This greatly surprised Mosher. What was certain was that the crystal source ores here were not naturally formed. The caves here seemed to be man-made. The crystal source veins in this place were also artificially embedded in the surroundings. There were more than 1,000 caves here. He did not know how deep each cave was. If there were so many crystal source ores in each cave, then how many crystal source ores were there in the entire ice cave? Even the 3 great factions and the former dragon clan would not be able to take out such a huge amount of crystal source ores. What kind of person, what kind of faction would hide these crystal source ores here for? With such doubts in his mind, Mosher ordered each of his doppelgangers to use their dragon senses to explore the cave as they continued to walk forward. His doppelgangers walked along the crystal source ores corridor. They continued to explore the cave with their dragon senses. After walking for about 50 kilometers, there seemed to be no change in the surroundings. However, at this time, all of Mosher's doppelgangers seemed to have reached the end of the cave 50 kilometers in front of them. Their dragon senses could no longer explore the cave. Mosher was puzzled. He clearly felt that there was still space in front of him, but his dragon senses could not explore it. This feeling was the same as when he used his dragon senses to explore the cave at Full Heart Waterfall. While puzzled, he controlled his doppelgangers and continued to move forward. However, after walking for about 10 kilometers, something strange happened. Almost all of his doppelgangers lost contact with him in an instant. It was as if there was suddenly no signal. Immortality could not help but be shocked. Chapter 493. The scene just now was very strange. Immortality's clones didn't detect any danger in the surroundings at all. But in an instant he lost contact with these clones. It was like a phone suddenly losing its signal. Immortality frowned slightly. When the elders of the three major sects saw Immortality frown, their hearts trembled slightly. But before Immortality said anything, none of them dared to say anything to disturb Immortality. After a while, Immortality turned around and said to the elders of the three major sects, "Continue. You guys can continue." Then he brought Happy and left the ice cave. He didn't know what kind of danger was in the ice cave. But losing contact with his clones just now made him feel uneasy. So he decided to leave this place for the time being. The three elders hurriedly lowered their heads and said, "Yes, yes." But when they came back to their senses they all felt strange. Could it be that Island Master Mo didn't come for the crystal source or? But if he came for the crystal source or why did he suddenly leave? The three elders looked at each other in dismay. But after a while they suppressed the doubts in their hearts. Although they didn't know why Island Master Mo suddenly left, it was a good thing that he left. As long as Island Master Mo left, the crystal source or here would be divided equally among the three major sections. No other forces would dare to fight with them. Of course they also kept an eye on it. Maybe Island Master Mo's clones just now found something wrong down there. Not a single one of his 100 clones came back. It's very likely that there's some kind of danger down there. So it's best that we don't act rashly for the time being. Let's report this situation to the sects first and then make a decision. That's all we can do. Thus, the three of them reported what they had just encountered to the sect. When the higher-ups of the three major sects heard that they had encountered Island Master Mo, they attached great importance to this matter. They also heard that Island Master Mo had hurriedly left after sending his 100 clones down. This made them even more interested in the ice cave and even more vigilant. Therefore they sent more people and brought more equipment and instruments to explore the ice cave. As for Immortality, he had already left North Pole Island with Happy. Continue to travel the world, see all the beautiful sceneries in the world and taste all the delicacies in the world. His days were spent comfortably and comfortably. 2 months later, news from the three major sects arrived. All the ice caves collapsed. About 500 disciples of the three major sects were trapped in the ice cave. The three great sects hurriedly organized people to rescue him day and night. Finally, on the 5th day they managed to rescue the disciples. Contrary to their expectations, none of these disciples died except for some minor injuries and excessive fright. After that, the three sects brought the disciples back to their sections. On one hand, they arranged for specialized doctors to treat them, and on the other hand, they arranged for a psychiatrist to intervene and treat them after the psychological creation. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. The injuries of these disciples were quickly healed. The disciples who were shocked gradually calmed down. But on this day something unexpected happened. The disciples of the Flame Dawn Ancient sect lived in an apartment. A female psychologist was counseling a disciple who had been overly shocked. She had a warm smile on her face and said, "He-Fang, you've almost fully recovered. Today is the last treatment. After today you can cultivate and live normally." The disciple nodded. "Thank you for taking care of me during this time." The psychologist smiled and shook her head. "It's what I should do." As she spoke, she turned around and packed her clothes, intending to leave. However, when she had just put on her coat and turned around, she was shocked. Because He-Fang, who was sitting on the chair just now, had already arrived behind her. He was face to face with her. The two of them were less than an inch apart. Moreover, there was a hint of fiery light in He-Fang's eyes. The psychologist was slightly taken aback and asked, "He-Fang, it was fine if she didn't speak." When she said this, He-Fang's gaze became even more fervent. He suddenly reached out and grabbed the psychologist tightly. The psychologist repeatedly shouted, "He-Fang, this is not good. Let go of me, let go of me. If you don't let go, I'll scream." Only then did she understand that He-Fang already had ill intentions towards her. He-Fang ignored the psychologist's cries. His eyes flashed with a beast-like eagerness. He opened his mouth and bit down on the psychologist's neck. This bite actually tore off a piece of flesh. The psychologist was in so much pain that she almost fainted. Her heart was filled with extreme fear. Just now, she thought that He Fong was just going to do something beastly to her. She didn't expect this guy to become a real beast. "Help! Help me!" the psychologist screamed out in shock. A sharp and ear-piercing voice penetrated the door and echoed in the entire corridor. At the same time she kept struggling. But her strength was far inferior to He Fong's. She was tightly grabbed by He Fong and couldn't escape at all. Crack! The door was kicked open. 2 disciples of the Flame Dawn ancient sect barged in. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were also stunned. There was a bloody hole in the psychologist's neck that was constantly spurting out blood. He Fong's mouth and chest were full of blood. It was easy to guess what he was doing. F***CK. He Fong, you son of a b***tis, what are you doing? He Fong, I'm going to beat you to death. The 2 disciples pounced on He Fong. When He Fong saw this, he suddenly turned around and faced the 2 disciples. The strength of these 2 disciples was about the same as He Fong. They had both reached level 10. But now, He Fong was fighting without any regard for his life. And he didn't attack like a human. Instead, he pounced and bit like a beast. These 2 disciples were actually forced to retreat. During the battle, He Fong bit another disciple's wrist. That disciple felt the pain and hurriedly retreated. Just as they were fighting, the 3rd disciple had already jumped in through the window. He picked up the psychiatrist and pulled her out of the room. At the same time, more than 10 disciples had already rushed over from the corridor. These disciples worked together and condensed a genetic martial art. After breaking He Fong's 2 legs and 2 arms, they were able to control him. At this moment they took a closer look at He Fong. They saw that He Fong's eyes had already turned black. The fingertips of his hands were actually more than an inch long and were extremely hard. 4 fangs had also grown out of his mouth. He looked very scary. Although his arms and legs were broken, he didn't seem to care at all. It continued to try to get up and open its mouth to bite the disciples around it. Chapter 494. Mo Shi continued to tour the continent happily. On the other hand, the number 1 sect of the Flaming Origin continent, the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect, was undergoing a drastic change. He Fong was finally under control after biting 2 people in the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect. The other disciple took the opportunity to rescue the female psychiatrist. When they looked at He Fong again, the area around his eyes had turned greenish-black. Sharp claws and fangs had grown out. He was like a wild beast, constantly roaring. When he looked at the surrounding disciples, his gaze was like that of a bloodthirsty beast. A few disciples hurriedly went to inform their superiors. However, when their superiors hurried over, another scream was heard from the other side. A few more disciples hurriedly rushed in the direction of the scream. They saw that the female psychologist who was bitten just now had a mouth full of blood. Her eyes had turned greenish-black. 2 half-inch sharp teeth were exposed at the corner of her mouth. Her fingernails were also more than an inch long. When she saw these humans, her gaze was like that of a wild beast. When the other disciples saw this, they hurriedly went forward and tried to control the female psychologist. However, at this moment, another scream was heard from the other side. It turned out that the disciple who had his finger bitten off by He Fong had also mutated. At the same time, in the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect, the disciples' apartments were filled with screams. Disciples were mutating everywhere. One had to know that there were more than 80 disciples who were trapped in the ice cave. Now these 80 disciples suddenly mutated at the same time. The surrounding disciples were caught off guard and were either scratched or bitten. Then they mutated one after another. The speed of mutation was not fast in the beginning. After being scratched, it would take more than 5 minutes for the mutation to take place. However, when the disciples who were scratched went to scratch others, the speed at which these people mutated became faster. The more people there were in the middle of the mutation, the faster the mutation speed. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. In less than 15 minutes, those who were scratched had their mutation speed reduced to 1 minute. When the higher-ups of the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect rushed over, more than 500 disciples had already been infected. When the elders of the Flaming Origin Ancient Sect saw this, they could only make up their minds and send out a wave of energy to kill these 500 disciples. After these 500 disciples were killed, all the remaining disciples fell silent. All of them wore pained expressions. Some of the disciples who were killed were their friends, while others were their brothers. Yet there was nothing they could do. They could only watch as their friends and brothers died here. However, their bitter and sorrowful emotions did not last long before they were replaced by shock. The muscles on the bodies of the mutated disciples who had been blasted into pieces of flesh and blood were wriggling rapidly. The wound was healing rapidly. There were even 2 disciples who were blasted into meat paste, but at this time the meat paste was flowing. Then they quickly converged. The silhouette of a human began to emerge from the meat paste. When the surrounding people saw this, they were all terrified. The great elder shouted, "Everyone step back." On the flaming origin continent, it wasn't rare for one to recover quickly after being injured. Even if some people were hit in the heart, they would be able to recover quickly in a short time. However, no matter who it was, as long as their head was blown off, there was basically no possibility of recovery. However, these 2 fellows had clearly been blasted into minced meat, yet they were still able to revive. How could this not make the crowd panic? The great elder, as a level 4 Grand Desolate Master, was unable to kill these 2 fellows. Moreover, it wasn't just these 2 fellows. The other mutated disciples who had just been blasted to death slowly stood up at this time. Seeing this, the great elder could only wave his right hand and condense an energy light shield. These mutated disciples were all shrouded in it. Those mutated disciples rushed towards the light shield one after another. However, the light shield did not move at all. Only then did the surrounding disciples let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, the other elders had also rushed over. After they understood the situation, they all began to speculate. Are they infected with some kind of virus? Is it the zombie virus? It doesn't seem like it. The zombie virus's infectivity is not so terrifying. Then what kind of virus is it? This needs to be carefully studied. After a simple discussion, they found a few virus specialists in the sect. The virus specialists put on their energy protective suits. This kind of energy protective suit had an outer and inner layer that was a normal physical protective suit. The interlayer in the middle was a layer of energy. This kind of energy was very good at isolating viruses. Basically, there was no known virus that could break through this kind of energy protective suit. After that, the great elder used the energy again to blast the mutated disciples within the light shield. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2 disciples carefully passed through the light shield and entered the range of the virus. They planned to collect some virus samples. However, at this time, Sanguisurincus suddenly grew out of the blood on the ground. These Sanguisurincus seemed to be alive. They slowly climbed along the legs of the 2 experts, climbed up their energy protective suits and climbed up their bodies. The 2 of them were not panicked at first. After all, they were wearing energy protective suits. However, soon their faces revealed a look of horror. They saw that on these Sanguisurincus, there were many small spikes. These spikes were constantly stabbing the protective suits. There were many small holes in the protective suits. The great elder who was outside was shocked. These protective suits were all made of special materials. The protective properties were extremely good. Even knives and swords could not cut open a crack. Now, the spikes on these Sanguisurincus could actually pierce through the protective suits? He quickly shouted, "Both of you get out of here." The 2 disciples hurriedly retreated out of the light shield. Just as they were retreating out of the light shield, the energy in the energy protective suits kept leaking out through the hundreds and thousands of small holes. When they reached the edge of the light shield, the energy in their protective suits had completely leaked out. At this time, the Sanguisurincus entangled their bodies again. The spikes kept stabbing their protective suits. The protective suit was easily pierced through as if it was made of paper. The 2 of them suddenly screamed in horror and pain. Ah, no. However, no matter how loudly they screamed, even if their elders were close by, they could not save them. On the contrary, the great elder saw that the 2 of them were beyond saving and raised his right hand. In his right hand, a mass of energy had already condensed. "Great elder, what are you doing?" "Great elder, please, I can still be saved." Boom! In the midst of their pleas, the 2 of them had already turned into 2 piles of blood. Chapter 495. The 2 disciples of the ancient flame sect had been killed by their grand elder. The other disciples in the surroundings were all extremely shocked. Although they knew that the grand elder had no choice but to do so. If the 2 disciples had escaped, it would have caused more casualties. It was obvious that they had been infected with some kind of virus. The Grand Elder had finally managed to control the virus with the energy shield. If they had escaped, it would not have been so easy to control them again. At the same time, the ancient dragon sect, which was ranked second on the Flaming Dawn continent, was experiencing the same thing. In the end, their sect master had used a similar method to trap the virus. The Mystic Moon sect, which was ranked third, was also experiencing the same outbreak. The sect master of the Mystic Moon sect had used the same method to control the virus. However, she had only used the energy shield to control the virus. Within the energy shield, the infected disciples had been killed countless times, but they were still able to survive. This caused everyone present to be extremely terrified. They reported this situation to the island masters of the various hunting islands on the continent. After watching the video of the scene, the island masters fell silent. Some of the island masters even had a trace of fear in their eyes. Viruses had always existed on the Flaming Dawn continent, especially on the hunting islands. The island masters of the hunting islands had developed all kinds of viruses in order to allow the creatures on the hunting grounds to continue to mutate. The most typical ones were the zombie virus, vampire virus, and werewolf virus. Among these 4 viruses, the zombie virus spread the fastest and was the most destructive. Therefore, all the island masters of the hunting islands strictly controlled these viruses. However, no matter how powerful a virus was, it could always kill its host. As long as the host of the virus was killed, the transmission of the virus would be greatly reduced. However, this new virus could not be killed at all. Not only could it not be killed, but it also consumed a lot of energy to maintain the energy shield. Once the energy supply ran out, the shield could break at any time, causing the virus to flow out again. Many research institutions on the hunting islands brought many professional instruments to the 3 sects to study these viruses. Although the virus could not be brought out of the shield, they could extend the instruments into the shield to investigate. In the end, after 3 days of research, they came to a conclusion. This virus was the zombie virus. However, it was not the traditional zombie virus but a mutated one. They called it the new zombie virus. These new zombie viruses had a stronger ability to spread and were very difficult to kill. Therefore, the 3 major sects agreed to let the virus research institutions of the hunting islands stay in their sects to study the zombie virus. However, just 5 days later, the situation changed again. On the 5th day, faint green spots began to appear on the skin of these researchers. Especially around their eyes, dark circles began to appear. At first, they didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that it was just because they had stayed up late to work. But later, as time passed, more and more green spots appeared on their bodies and they were getting bigger and bigger. They finally panicked. After a virus test, a new type of zombie virus was detected from their bodies. This filled the hearts of these staff members with despair. They had watched the videos about the new zombie virus and knew what happened to those infected with the new zombie virus. They didn't want to die. However, if they did not enter the light barrier once their bodies were completely controlled by the virus, they would lose their consciousness and attack humans like wild beasts. Thus, after some hesitation, some virus researchers reported this matter to the higher-ups of the 3 major sections. At the same time, they did some research on the virus in their bodies. In the end, they came to a frightening conclusion. The new zombie virus could be spread through the air. The zombie virus was very scary, but it was only spread through contact. And this new zombie virus could actually be spread through the air. In other words, everyone who went to the North Pole Island could have been infected. And now, all the disciples of the 3 major sects could have been infected. This discovery caused the 3 major sects to be extremely panicked. They hurriedly organized their disciples to conduct a virus test. As a result, 30% of the disciples of the 3 major sects were infected. It must be known that the 3 major sects had more than 1 million disciples combined. 30% of the disciples were infected, which meant that more than 300,000 disciples had been infected. Moreover, although the rest of the disciples were not infected, the virus could be spread through the air. Therefore, every second they stayed in the sects increased their chances of being infected. Thus, the disciples of the 3 major sects who were not infected began to flee the 3 major sections. Although the higher-ups of the sects knew about this, they couldn't stop them. If they didn't let them escape, were they supposed to let them stay here and be infected? At this time, the 3 major sects could only place their hopes on those research groups. Unfortunately, the research groups held a pessimistic attitude toward the new zombie virus. Many researchers had already entered the energy barrier on their own. This was tantamount to suicide. However, there were also a small number of virus researchers who found an opportunity to escape the 3 major sections. Without a doubt, these researchers had all been infected by the virus. If they escaped from the 3 major sects, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although the 3 major sects did their utmost to search for them, there were still 5 fish that escaped the net in the end. No one knew where they had fled to. The several hundred researchers who had been captured could only forcibly send them into the energy barrier. Previously, they had made a lot of contributions and sacrifices in order to research the virus. But now, if they were to leave, the whole continent might be in huge trouble. This was the truth. Although they couldn't bear it, they still had to send them into the energy barrier. However, although the three major sects barely managed to control the situation, they weren't the only ones who had entered the ice cave at that time. On the North Pole Island, many gold diggers had entered the ice cave. Even those who hadn't been to the ice cave had gone to the edge of the ice cave. And these people had basically all been infected by the new zombie virus. Therefore, this was a huge hidden danger. Although the three major sects thought of many methods, it was useless. In the end, they could only release a joint announcement to the world. Joint announcement from the Ancient Flame sect, Ancient Dragon sect, and Mystic Moon Female sect. A new zombie virus has entered the flaming continent. This virus can be transmitted through the air and through contact. Remind everyone on the flaming continent to prepare a gas mask. If you encounter a person with a green body, black eye circles, fangs and sharp claws, run away as soon as possible. Don't try to kill them because they can't be killed. Chapter 496. This joint announcement caused an uproar in the entire flaming land. Although the three sects were very domineering most of the time, they would find some high-sounding reasons to do things. But for such a big event to be jointly announced by the three sects, it couldn't be fake. For a time, the entire flaming land was in a state of panic. All the major forces began to seal their gates. All the hunting islands began to seal their islands. Although it would cost a lot. But compared to human lives, no matter how big the price, it was not worth mentioning. After contacting the three sects and confirming the authenticity of the incident, the government also began to seal the roads and cities. Even the government confirmed that it was true, so the people naturally knew that it couldn't be fake. Therefore, all the gas masks in the shopping malls and shops were sold out. As cultivators, many people could hold their breath for a long time. Even after becoming a hunter, it was not difficult to hold their breath for a month. But no one could hold their breath forever. So people were crazily fighting for gas masks. And all the manufacturers of gas masks were also speeding up the production of gas masks. Many manufacturers that did not produce gas masks in the past also opened mini gas mask production lines. But even so, it was far from enough for everyone to buy a gas mask. After all, the population of the flaming land was as high as 50 trillion. The daily production of gas masks in the flaming land was only a little more than 100,000. This was because almost everyone in the flaming land was a cultivator. Most of the time, if they encountered a special situation, they could survive by holding their breath. There was no need to use gas masks. Only those who worked in poisonous gas all year round could use gas masks. While people were crazily fighting for gas masks. In a remote mountain village. One night, a disciple who had escaped from the flaming land ancient sect sneaked in. In the middle of the night, there was a burst of screams in the village. This scream woke up all the villagers in the village. What followed was more than half an hour of screams. Half an hour later, the village fell into silence. All the villagers fell into a pool of blood. The next morning, many zombies appeared in the village. All of them had green faces and fangs. Their eyes were dead. Then they ran in all directions. These zombies were not as stupid as zombies. Among these zombies, even the lowest level zombies were transformed from hunters. Therefore, not only were they very strong, but their intelligence was also higher than normal humans. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that they couldn't be killed at all. Even a grand desolate master would not be able to do anything to them. Left with no other choice, they could only resort to methods that they had no other choice. That was nuclear weapons. After confirming that there was no one in a certain place, they would use nuclear flattening on those places. As a result, many places on the Flaming Dawn continent were devastated. When the people on Hunting Island No. 1 heard about this, they all felt a sense of familiarity. They had experienced such an apocalyptic world back on Earth. What was happening on the Flaming Dawn continent was nothing more than a reenactment of the apocalypse on Earth. As for the fact that the virus could not be killed, they were not worried. Their dragon master, Mr. Mo, had brought them all the way from Earth. In less than 3 years, they had reached the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. No matter how ferocious the virus was, the Dragon Lord would be able to resolve it for them. As for Mo, sure, he had a strange feeling. He felt that it was very ironic. Of course, it was not ironic to himself, but to the humans on the Flaming Dawn continent. The people on the Flaming Dawn continent treated each planet as a hunting ground and threw the virus on these planets. Then they hunted the creatures on these hunting grounds. Now, the zombie virus had also appeared on the Flaming Dawn continent. The Flaming Dawn continent had also fallen into an apocalyptic disaster. It was really the cycle of the heavens and retribution. However, he was also thinking about how these viruses had come about. Could it be that creatures from a higher dimension had thrown these viruses onto the Flaming Dawn continent? Of course, Emoshir's idea was just his wild guess. He still had to take a look at these viruses. He had to see where these viruses came from. So on this day he came to the known origin of the viruses, North Pole Island. He hovered above North Pole Island and used his dragon sense to investigate below. He saw that the entire North Pole city was almost filled with zombies. The people living here were the first to be infected. There used to be more than 50,000 people living on North Pole Island. Now, there were more than 50,000 new zombies here. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at these zombies, and the attributes of these zombies quickly appeared in his mind. Species, General Corpse. Level 3 General Corpse equivalent to Level 3 Scavenger. Special ability, Immortality. Emoshir was a little confused. What was a General Corpse? The system's voice sounded frowny face. One of the 4 great zombie ancestors, Jianghu. The zombies infected by him are called General Corpses. General Corpses have the trait of immortality, so they are also called immortal corpses. Hearing this, Emoshir's heart skipped a beat. Once when he was on Earth he had seen an owl. At first he thought that the owl had been infected with the zombie virus. But later he found that the owl could not be killed. At that time, when he used the demon blood's eye to look, he found that the owl had the heart of Jianghu and could not be killed. He did not expect to encounter zombies infected by Jianghu after coming to the Flaming Dawn continent. Emoshir pondered for a moment and planned to use memory plunder to check the memories of these zombies. He wanted to see where they came from. However, under his investigation he found that the memories of these zombies were completely chaotic. He could not find anything. Emoshir did not investigate further. With a thought he said in his mind, "System, select the reward check-in and sign in the demon-suppressing orb." The system's voice quickly sounded. "This check-in will consume 1.5 million evolution points. Confirm check-in?" Emoshir glanced at the balance of evolution points in his mind. He saw that behind the 3 words evolution points was a long string of numbers. As for how many trillions of evolution points there were, he was too lazy to count. Ever since he came to the Flaming Dawn continent, evolution points were rarely used. But as long as he killed infected creatures, he would always receive the corresponding evolution points. "Confirm check-in," Emoshir said. Soon, a walnut-sized orb appeared in his backpack. This bead was sparkling and translucent. It was an orb nurtured by the dragon's body and was full of righteousness. A single orb could suppress 10,000 demons. Emoshir had used it once in the vampire's lair on Earth. After that, because it consumed too many evolution points, he never used it again. Today he would try to see if this demon-suppressing orb was still as powerful when it encountered a General Corpse. Chapter 497. With a thought, Emoshir took out the demon-suppressing orb from his system backpack. The orb's surface looked crystal clear. But if one looked closely, they would find that it contained some kind of extremely violent energy. This kind of energy was very unfamiliar to Emoshir. It was not like the energy in human cultivators' bodies. It was also not like the energy in zombies or desolate beasts' bodies. At this moment the zombies below also noticed Emoshir in the sky. They immediately jumped into the air. These General Corpses could not fly, but they could all jump very high. Even the lowest level 1 General Corpse could jump up to more than 10 meters high. As for the mutated General Corpses, which were equivalent to desolate hunters, they could jump up to 100 meters high. Emoshir slightly increased his altitude. He let himself reach a height of more than 700 meters. These General Corpses would no longer be able to reach him. Then he held the demon-suppressing orb in his right hand. At a certain moment, his right index finger and thumb loosened. The demon-suppressing orb quietly fell. As the General Corpses around it kept jumping up, it quietly fell from the middle of these General Corpses as if it was weightless. Some General Corpses also noticed the falling orb. They pounced straight at the orb. They reached out to grab the orb. However, after the orb fell into their hands, it was not affected at all. And their hands were like snow meeting burning charcoal. A hole was melted in their hands. A few more General Corpses pounced over. But these General Corpses' bodies were all pierced through by the orb. This orb seemed to be falling gently. However, nothing could affect its whereabouts. A moment later it slowly landed. The next moment, a blood-red light instantly burst out from within the orb. This blood-red light was extremely dazzling. Everything within a 10-kilometer radius had turned into a blood-red world. There was no sound, only the blood-red color that filled all the space. A moment later, the blood-red color disappeared. And half of all the general corpses within 10 kilometers disappeared. The general corpses 10 kilometers away only saw the sudden appearance of the red light. A moment later, the red light disappeared. Their kind had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never appeared in this world. Each and every one of them was greatly shocked. These corpse generals seemed to only know how to run around like headless flies. But that was because they couldn't be killed. Therefore they were fearless and pressed forward courageously. However, one had to know that their IQ was higher than that of normal humans. How could they not be alarmed when they suddenly saw their companion disappear so inexplicably? Overwhelmed with fear, the corpse generals began to flee in all directions. When Immortality saw this, he couldn't help but shake his head. A general corpse was nothing more than this. Actually, it wasn't that the general corpse wasn't powerful. Immortality's demon-suppressing orb was simply too powerful. At this moment, Immortality looked into his mind. The kill points in his mind had already reached 4 billion. As long as he could get 6 billion kill points, he would be promoted to a level 10 Desolate Hunter. This meant that if he killed ordinary general corpses, he would only get 1 kill point for every 10 general corpses. But don't forget that many parts of the continent have been infected. Moreover, judging from the rate at which the zombie virus was spreading, it would probably spread across the entire continent very soon. There were hundreds of billions of Desolate Hunters on the entire continent. Therefore, it wouldn't be difficult for him to become a level 10 Desolate Hunter. However, Immortality didn't want the entire continent to be infected by the virus. If the entire continent was infected by the virus, even if he eliminated all the virus in the end, there would only be a few people left on Hunting Island 1. What was the point? At this moment, Immortality looked down at the general corpses that were fleeing in all directions. He wasn't too satisfied with the attack range of the demon-suppressing orb. His draconic will moved and blasted at the general corpses. Boom 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 boom. The general corpses all exploded. But in just a moment, the general corpses recovered to their original state. Immortality shook his head slightly. In the past, whether it was the zombie virus or other viruses, his draconic will could suppress their recovery ability. But now it seemed that his draconic will had no effect on the zombie virus. He could only ask in his mind, "System, can the demon-suppressing orb be upgraded?" The system's voice replied, frowny face, yes, but after the upgrade, the evolution points required for each check-in will increase by 10 times. Immortality nodded, then upgrade it. Soon, the system's voice sounded, frowny face, upgrade successful. After the upgrade, each designated check-in will consume 15 million evolution points. Immortality looked at the evolution points in his mind. There were so many that he felt it was just a string of numbers. He said, "System, designate the demon-suppressing orb to check-in." Check-in successful. Check-in reward. 1 demon-suppressing orb. Immortality moved his mind and took out the upgraded demon-suppressing orb from his backpack. The upgraded demon-suppressing orb was no longer the size of a walnut. Instead, it was the size of a fist. He narrowed his eyes and carefully sensed it. The energy contained in this demon-suppressing orb was dozens of times more powerful than the previous demon-suppressing orb. Immortality let go of his hand gently. The demon-suppressing orb was still like rain, slowly falling. After a moment, it landed gently. The moment it landed, a dazzling red light appeared again. But this time, the range of the dazzling red light expanded by 10 times. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, all infected humans and animals were instantly annihilated in this red light. When the red light disappeared, this world of ice and snow seemed so clean and clear. There was not a trace of impurities. Immortality looked down at this world wrapped in silver and snow and shook his head slightly. The world here was supposed to be like this. He moved his mind and instantly teleported to the edge of the ice cave. He saw that the ice cave had already collapsed. Only a huge ice cave with a radius of more than 10 kilometers was left. Immortality used his dragon will to carefully investigate this place, but he did not find anything else. He paused for a moment before rushing in the direction of the first hunting island. The first hunting island had the support of the Dragon Palace. Its current defense could defend against attacks below the Grand Desolate Master level. But these general corpses were immortal. Even the defense of the Dragon Palace could not destroy those immortal general corpses. From what Immortality knew, it seemed that only the demon-suppressing orb could destroy those immortal general corpses. Of course, he had not tried the dragon-slaying saber, nor had he tried other methods. But no matter how strong the other methods were, it was still his personal ability. And if the entire continent was infected, and only the first hunting island was not infected in the end, countless general corpses would swarm towards the first hunting island. Then, no matter how strong his personal ability was, it would be impossible for him to stop the almost endless general corpses. Therefore he had to sign in more demon-suppressing orbs. And other than that, he had to think of other ways. Chapter 498. Mo Shi returned to hunting island number 1. Every day he would sign in, and sign in again. He had 2 sign-in opportunities a day to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. Then he would distribute these demon-suppressing orbs to the people in the base, telling them that they could only use them when they were attacked by the infected. At the same time, Mo Shi was also constantly paying attention to the new developments of the zombie virus on the continent. Official news, June 1st. A new zombie virus appeared in 3 states. June 2nd. A new zombie virus appeared in the 4th state. June 5th. A new zombie virus appeared in the 5th state. June 10th. A new zombie virus appeared in 7 states. The new virus can be spread through the air and the new zombies can't be killed. All citizens are advised to wear a gas mask and hide in a safe place as soon as possible when encountering the new zombie. Do not have any contact with the new zombie. June 12th. Some people had already escaped to other planets on spaceships. But resources were limited. At present, only those who passed the test of the new zombie virus and reached the level of a hunter or above could escape to other planets on spaceships. Mo Shi looked at the shocking reports in these places. Looking at the map of the flaming beginning continent, at first only a few states had a few red dots. Gradually, more and more red dots appeared in these places. Red dots appeared in other states one after another. He remembered a game he played when he was on Earth. Plague Incorporated. The changes in the map in front of him were very similar to the scene in Plague Incorporated. In the end, the humans on Earth were almost extinct. And the map of the entire Earth turned blood red. Seeing this, Mo Shi's mood was also very low. Although he was not a saint and did not have to grieve for the death of everyone. But if all the humans in this world died, even if he survived, there would be no meaning in living. In fact, he had thought about using the demon-suppressing orb to destroy all the zombies in the places where there were zombies when the virus first broke out. But the virus spread too quickly. And he could only sign in at most 2 demon-suppressing orbs a day. And the flaming beginning continent was too big. Even if he kept teleporting to these places, it would be too late to stop it. In the flaming beginning ancient sect, several elders in the sect used their powerful strength to trap the virus in an energy shield. But that was all. Most of their disciples had already left. Only the desolate hunters and above were left. They planned to send the disciples who were desolate hunters and above onto the spaceship and let them escape to other planets. At the very least, they wanted to preserve the bloodline of the ancient flame sect. However, the elders couldn't make such a decision. They had to ask the sect master to make a decision. Even after such a huge incident, the sect master still hadn't appeared. This was because the sect master had already said before his seclusion that this seclusion was related to whether or not he could break through to become a level 10 Grand Desolate Master. Unless the sky is falling, do not disturb him. But now, the entire Flaming Dawn continent was facing extinction. Wasn't this equivalent to the sky collapsing? A total of 10 elders arrived at the Universe Tower where the ancient flame sect leader was in seclusion. They pondered for a long time. The first elder turned his head and looked at the other elders. Finally, he raised his head and looked at the Universe Tower. He bowed deeply and said with a long voice, "The flame-beginning continent is facing destruction, and so is the flame-beginning ancient sect. Sect Master, please come out of seclusion and save the disciples of the Flame Dawn ancient sect." The other 9 elders also knelt down at the same time. They said in unison, "The flame-beginning continent is facing destruction, and so is the Flame Dawn ancient sect. Sect Master, please come out of seclusion and save the disciples of the Flame Dawn ancient sect." After saying that, the 10 elders knelt on the ground again. The elders looked at each other. They didn't know what to do. In the end, the first elder knelt down again. He repeated it once more. The rest of the elders repeated the same thing. However, there was still no response from the Universe Tower. After a long time, the elders looked at each other. In the end, it was the first elder who knelt down again and spoke again. The rest of the elders followed the great elder's lead and bowed again, repeating their previous words. This time, as soon as they finished speaking, the door of the Universe Tower shattered with a loud bang. It was as if a train had crashed through from the inside. Gravel flew in all directions. The elders were all shocked. However, none of them dared to use their energy to block or dodge. They could only let the gravel hit their bodies. When the gravel stopped flying, the smoke and dust dissipated. A figure emerged from the Jianghu tower. This figure wasn't the Flame Dawn ancient sect master. Instead, it was a lowly about 14 or 15 years old. She had 2 ponytails and was dressed in JK attire. She had a pair of big watery eyes that could make people sink in. She had a cute face and anyone who saw her would want to take a look at her. At this moment, she was looking at her surroundings with a pair of big, curious eyes like a curious baby. The 10 elders were all shocked when they saw this. Then, the first elder came to his senses and pointed at the lowly with his right hand. "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the forbidden area of the Flame Dawn ancient sect?" The lowly looked around and carefully identified the 10 elders. Then, she cursed angrily with a face full of anger. "Damn it, you old fogies. It's all because of you that I became like this. I'll stew you and feed you to the dogs." The faces of the 10 elders were filled with shock and anger. However, when they heard this, they all trembled. The first elder swallowed his saliva and asked tentatively, Sect master?" The lowly cursed angrily. "Nonsense, if it's not me, who else can it be?" When the first elder heard this, he immediately knelt on the ground. His eyes were full of fear. The other elders also knelt on the ground at the same time. "Welcome back, sect master. Welcome back, sect master." The lowly pointed at the 10 elders who were kneeling on the ground and cursed. Come out, your sister. I was going to break through to a level 10 Grand Desolate Master and reach a higher realm. If I want to reach a higher realm, I have to use my consciousness to traverse space. When traversing space, my consciousness will be attached to the people in the other space. As long as I traverse space 81 times, I will be able to break through and reach a higher realm. I've already traversed space 79 times. I only need 2 more. Damn it, you guys messed up my traversing. Now, my body has traversed to another space and my consciousness has brought this body back. Are you satisfied? When the elders heard this, they were all sweating profusely. How could such a thing happen? However, the actions of the person in front of them were undoubtedly their sect master. In his anger, the sect master looked at the sky. He sighed. "Sigh, it's all my dead father's fault. Of all the names he could give me, he actually called me Luoli. Now I'm really a lowly. Damn it." Chapter 499. The sect master of the ancient flame sect had always been like this. He would curse first. After cursing, he would think about how to solve the problem. The 10 elders knew that the sect master was like this, so when the sect master cursed, none of them made a sound. They all listened quietly. 5 minutes later, the sect master finished cursing, and the first elder spoke. "Sect master, we have disturbed your breakthrough and caused you to become like this. We are all very guilty. No matter what you want to do with us, we won't dare to complain. But there is something urgent that needs to be solved." Sect Master Raleigh's mouth was dry from all the cursing. He directly spread his legs and sat on the steps in front of the Jianghu tower. He said, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. Once you are done, I will go back and find a way to get my original body back." The first elder couldn't help but twitch his eyes. Because when the sect master sat, the first elder could see the sect master's body from his position. He couldn't help but want to remind the sect master that he was exposed. But after thinking about it, he held back. He said, "Sect master, there is a new zombie virus that is very powerful. Not only does it spread quickly through the air, but the virus can't be killed with the current methods of the flaming origin continent. It has a trend of becoming a pandemic. The major sects have already transferred their disciples above the desolate hunter realm to other planets. I've discussed with a few elders, and we've decided to transfer some of our disciples to other planets. But this is a serious matter, and we have to get the sect master's permission. That is why we have disturbed the sect master's breakthrough." Raleigh heard this and had a look of disdain. He cursed, "What are you elders doing? Our ancient flame sect is the #1 sect in the world, and we have a deep foundation. Can't you even deal with a small virus? Do you still need to escape to other planets? Don't you know that the flaming origin continent is the most suitable planet for us to live on and has the most resources?" The elders lowered their heads and didn't dare to answer. Only the first elder mustered the courage to speak. "We are incompetent. Sect master, if you have a way to deal with the new zombie virus, please do it and save the disciples of the ancient flame sect from the abyss of suffering." Lori tossed the ponytail on his shoulder to the back and said, "It's just a small matter, yet you still need the sect master to personally take action. I'm so tired of being the sect master. Let's go, take me there." As he spoke, he stood up. However, when she stood up, her ponytail slid down her shoulders again. Lori impatiently flung him behind him and scolded, "That's right. F***CKU." When the elders saw this, they wanted to laugh but did not dare to. He could only forcefully hold it in. The first elder heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the sect master had finally stood up. Finally, he didn't have to look up to see Fat-Tu. Soon, they arrived before the light barrier with Luo Li. Luo Li saw that there were already more than 50 disciples within the light barrier. The faces of the disciples turned pale. There were thick dark circles around his eyes. All of them had green faces and fangs looking very frightening. When they saw Luo Li coming over, they all rushed towards him through the light shield. Although it was blocked by the light barrier, it still looked very scary. The first elder next to him explained, "They are all infected with the new zombie virus and can't be killed at all. No matter if it's physical, energy, or any other means, even if their heads are blown up, they can recover in a short time." When Luo Li heard this, he flung his ponytail behind him and said, "F***CK, such a powerful virus. Let me try." As she spoke, a ball of fiery red energy condensed in her hands. She waved this energy out. This ball of energy entered the light barrier. As soon as it entered the light barrier, it exploded. The glaring red light made almost everyone present feel as if they were blinded in an instant. However, this explosion did not make any sound. It was like watching a star explode in the universe. It looked very powerful, but no sound could be heard. When the red light gradually faded, everyone's vision returned to normal. At this moment, when they looked inside the light barrier again, there were no longer any green-faced disciples with fangs. There was nothing there. When the first elders saw this, they were all shocked. They had tried all kinds of methods these days, but they couldn't do anything about the zombie virus. Now, the sect leader just casually waved a ball of energy and completely destroyed those zombies. What kind of strength did the sect leader have? Sect leader Luo Li seemed to have seen through everyone's doubts. She waved her hand impatiently and said, "When you're lucky enough to be as strong as me, you'll naturally know. There's nothing to be surprised about. The most important thing now is to quickly summon all the disciples back. I went into seclusion and all of you killed all the disciples of my ancient flame sect. F***CK." When the first elders heard this, they nodded. "Yes, sect leader." Next, Luo Li used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. This scene made everyone's eyes widen. The first elder was a level 6 Grand Desolate Master, but he could only use the energy barrier to cover a radius of a few kilometers. However, the sect leader used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. One had to know that the mountain where the ancient flame sect was located on was at least 100 kilometers wide. This was the difference between them. Next, the disciples of the ancient flame sect received the news and returned to the ancient flame sect. When the rest of the people heard the news, they quickly gathered around the ancient flame sect. They weren't disciples of the ancient flame sect and couldn't go up the mountain. However, in the entire continent, only the sect leader of the ancient flame sect could eliminate the virus. Therefore, it would be safer for them to stay near the flame-beginning ancient sect than anywhere else. Gradually, the disciples of the other factions who were unable to ride a flying ship started to gather around the Flame Dawn ancient sect. In an instant, there were tens of millions of people within 100 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. Gradually the news spread far and wide. Even many people from other prefectures rushed to the ancient flame sect when they heard the news. After hearing this news, Mo was also somewhat puzzled in his heart. How did the sect leader of the ancient flame sect kill the corpse general virus? However, it was still a good thing that there was someone who could kill the corpse general virus. However, the sect leader of the ancient flame sect and Mo were far from enough. The number of infected people on the continent was still increasing rapidly. The map of the continent was also turning red. Chapter 500. Mo could only shake his head and sigh helplessly when he saw the map gradually turning red. The virus was so aggressive that even he couldn't stop it. The only thing he could do was to protect the first hunting island. Of course, other than getting 2 demon-suppressing orbs every day, he didn't idle around. Although he had a lot of evolution points, it consumed 30 million evolution points every day. If he didn't have any income, it wouldn't be long before he used up all his points. Therefore he still had to hunt these general corpses every day to obtain kill points and evolution points. On a mountain more than 200 kilometers away from the Mystic Moon sect, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect led the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to set up camp in this city. All the desolate hunters of the Mystic Moon sect had already left the flaming continent by flying ship. Originally, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect should also escape. However, she couldn't bear to see the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect die in the flaming continent. Therefore, she and an elder led these disciples to avoid the general corpses and escape to this mountain. The general corpses seemed to have some kind of reaction to humans. They would always go to places where humans gathered. Now that the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had gathered, they would naturally attract a large number of general corpses. That night, when the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were resting, they suddenly heard the roar of a general corpse at the foot of the mountain. They quickly prepared for battle. When they looked carefully, they found that there were about thousands of people running up the mountain. Behind them were tens of thousands of new zombies. They roared and chased after them. These people's combat power was very strong. As long as they turned around, they could take down a large number of new zombies. However, these zombies were almost immortal. The zombies that were taken down would quickly get up and continue to chase after them. These people could only run up the mountain. However, the path up the mountain had already been cut off by the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect. Therefore, at this time, the mountain was surrounded by cliffs. Those people ran to the edge of the cliff and saw that there was no way to go. They all cursed. Damn it. Why is the path cut off? Damn it. Some of them had flying skateboards. However, they were only a few. The others' flying skateboards were basically damaged during the long flight. At this moment, someone saw someone on the opposite mountain. Moreover, these people were all wearing the clothes of the Mystic Moon female sect. He could not help exclaiming aloud, "Senior sisters of the Mystic Moon female sect, we are disciples of the ancient dragon sect, please save us." The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect snorted when she received the report. The ancient dragon sect treated our Mystic Moon female sect well on the surface, but who knows how many obstacles they have set for us in the dark. They only had themselves to blame for their actions today. Ignore it. As a result, the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect could only watch as the ancient dragon sect disciples were surrounded by the new zombies. Although they had been fighting and struggling for more than 20 minutes, they had all died on the opposite cliff in the end. When the new zombies saw the Mystic Moon female sect disciples, their eyes turned red and they kept roaring at them. There were even new types of zombies trying to jump over the cliff. But in the end, because the distance was too far, they fell into the bottomless abyss after jumping halfway. However, the intelligence of these new zombies wasn't bad. Half an hour later, they thought of a solution. They came to the bottom of the cliff and began to climb up. Although the cliff was almost perpendicular to the ground. But for the hunters, it was not particularly difficult to climb. Similarly, it was not a problem for the new zombies with outstanding jumping ability. On the cliff, the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw this scene and quickly reported it to the sect leader. "Sect leader, what should we do?" The sect leader narrowed her eyes and slowly opened them. She was only putting up a final struggle with these 200,000 disciples. The virus was very aggressive. Even if she was here, it would only delay them for a few days. She had thought of bringing these disciples to the Ancient Flame sect. She heard that the sect leader of the Ancient Flame sect had come out of seclusion and could kill zombies. But this place was too far away from the Ancient Flame sect. How much danger would they have to go through? If they really went to the Ancient Flame sect, there would only be a few disciples left. But even if it was futile, she could not bear to not save them. But now they were at the end of their rope. Many of the flying skateboards were damaged. One had to know that these disciples had lost their flying devices and could not fly at all. She originally thought that by leaving the crowd and bringing these disciples to this mountain, they would be able to last for a while. But she did not expect the ancient dragon sect to attract zombies again. What should she do next? She sat there cross-legged and seemed to be calm. But she was already a little anxious. Because she could not think of any solution at the moment. She could kill her way out, but there were too many disciples. It was impossible for all of them to escape. Especially the zombies at the foot of the mountain. There were many of them. And the zombies could not be killed at all. So it seemed that she could not bring these disciples to break out of the encirclement. The surrounding disciples looked at the sect leader at this moment. They were all waiting for the sect leader to answer. But the elder next to her knew that tonight was going to be a difficult night. At this moment, another disciple came to report. Sect leader, these new zombies are already halfway up. The sect master sighed slightly. Only then did he manage to pull himself together and said, "Prepare for battle. We will kill our way out." Yes. The disciples yelled at the top of their lungs. They seemed to be full of vigor. But only they knew that tonight was really going to be over. Along the way, the sect leader had helped them solve too many difficulties. But tonight, even the sect leader would not be able to bring them out of danger. At this moment, a few disciples looked at each other. Suddenly, they knelt in front of the sect leader. "Sect leader, please forgive me for offending you. We will not accept the battle." Hearing that, the sect leader looked at that disciple. "Why not?" Those disciples looked at each other. One of them said, "Sect leader, we can't escape tonight. But you and the third elder have the ability and strength to leave. Please leave with the third elder first." When the other female disciples heard that, they came to their senses and knelt down together. "Sect leader, please leave with the third elder. Sect leader, please leave with the third elder." Hearing that, the sect leader slowly stood up. She said, "As the sect leader, if the Mystic Moon sect wants to be destroyed, I should die first." When the female disciples heard that, they all choked with sobs. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky not far away from them without any warning. Chapter 501. Just as the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were in a desperate situation. In the dark night sky, a figure suddenly appeared without any warning. Although it was night time, these Mystic Moon female sect disciples were not ordinary people. They were completely capable of seeing in the dark, but the things they saw were slightly darker than usual. When they saw Immortality, they were stunned. This was because they felt that this face was slightly familiar. Have they seen him before? They seemed to have. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it. Soon, a disciple remembered. "He is Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo. It really is Island Master Mo. What is he doing here?" They did not think that Island Master Mo was here to save them. Firstly, Island Master Mo was not related to them and had no obligation to ask them for help. Secondly, from past reviews, even though Island Master Mo wasn't an extremely evil person, he definitely wasn't a good person either. Naturally, he would not take such a huge risk to save them in the middle of the night. When the Mystic Moon female sect leader saw Immortality, it was as though she saw the last trace of hope. She hurriedly stood up and clasped her fists towards Immortality and said, "Island Master Mo, the Mystic Moon female sect has met with a great calamity. Please save us. If Island Master Mo needs us in the future, the Mystic Moon female sect will not refuse." Immortality did not say anything and only nodded. He had a good impression of this Mystic Moon female sect leader. Moreover, he originally came here to collect evolution points and slaughter points. With so many general corpses here, it was the best opportunity to collect evolution points and slaughter points. At this moment, his body slowly descended towards the bottom of the cliff. On the cliff, the general corpses that were climbing up saw this human in front of them and all let out excited roars. They continuously jumped towards Immortality and tried to push Immortality down. However, with a single thought from Immortality, these general corpses were unable to get close to him and all fell from the sky. On the cliff, when the Mystic Moon female sect disciples saw the zombies pouncing towards Immortality, their hearts tightened. Even though they knew that with Island Master Mo's strength, it would be very difficult for these new zombies to harm him. However, seeing that Immortality didn't use any energy to separate the zombies, they were naturally nervous. However, when they saw that none of the zombies were able to get close to Immortality, they came to a realization. Psychic Master. He must be a Psyche Master. No wonder Island Master Mo is so powerful. He is actually a Psyche Master. However, their sect master quickly noticed that something was amiss. She slowly shook her head, and her tone was somewhat surprised. "No, he's not a Psychic Master but a spiritual Psychic Master." The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were stunned when they heard this. Immediately he exclaimed in surprise, "Spiritual Psychic." They had seen spiritual Psyche Masters before. Mystic Moon female sect once had 5 spiritual Psyche Masters. In order to reach the level of a spiritual reader, one would need to spend a lot of energy and time, far more than an ordinary spiritual master or desolate hunter. Therefore, as long as one was a spiritual reader, it was impossible for them to cultivate anything else. However, according to what they knew, this Island Master Mo was originally an extremely powerful Grand Desolate Master. Summoner again. Now he was also a spiritual reader. Is there anything you don't know? However, some disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect started to worry. But why is he going down? There are thousands of new types of zombies below. Is he confident if he goes down? The Mystic Moon female sect master, Qian Xianyue, shook her head slightly. How can the likes of you guess the thoughts of a character like Island Master Mo? Those disciples quickly lowered their heads and kept quiet, not daring to say another word. At this moment, Mo Shi was slowly descending from the sky. When he was 100 meters away from the ground, the general zombies on the ground had already stretched their necks hungrily. They were even drooling from the corners of their mouths. When he descended a little further, these general zombies suddenly jumped into the air like a group of fleas that were suddenly hung out to dry. However, once they got close to Mo Shi only needed to move his dragon psyche slightly. These general zombies fell down one after another. Soon, Mo Shi landed in the air only 50 meters above the ground. At this moment, more general zombies pounced on Mo Shi. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the ground was filled with black general zombies. No matter who it was, if they were in such a situation they would only feel despair. Above the cliff, Qian Xianyue stared at Mo Shi. She was not worried for Mo Shi, but wanted to see how the continent's strongest person was like. At this moment, a saber appeared in Mo Shi's right hand. This saber looked very ordinary. It had a black body and the handle was wrapped with a black coarse cloth. It looked like a large butcher's knife. Then a fiery red energy poured into the butcher's knife from Mo Shi's right arm. After a short while, more than half of the energy in his body had been poured into the dragon-slaying saber. The originally ordinary dragon Salyer at this moment was actually shining brightly. In the next moment, Mo Shi swept the dragon-slaying saber with his right hand. Then, with a thought, he kept the dragon-slaying saber in his system backpack. Above the cliff, the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were all puzzled when they saw this scene. What is Island Master Mo doing? Why did Island Master Mo put the saber away? It's very strange. Qian Xianyue was also slightly surprised when she saw this scene. What she saw was exactly the same as what the female disciples saw. She had no idea what Mo Shi was doing. The only difference between her and the other female disciples was that she could faintly feel that Mo Shi's saber strike wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Just as the female disciples were puzzled. In the next moment, the black mass of general corpses below the cliff suddenly disappeared without a sign. It was so clean that not a single gap was left. Everyone was extremely surprised. Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that Island Master Mo's attack just now? Thinking of this, all the female disciples were inexplicably surprised. In their eyes, Island Master Mo had just casually swung the saber. After that, he put the saber away. He did not even use any energy. The thousands of new zombies disappeared just like that? Just as they were surprised, the ground suddenly trembled. Oh no, an earthquake! Someone cried out. But at this moment, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect shook her head and said, "No, it's Island Master Mo." Before she finished speaking, the shaking under her feet became even more intense. In the next moment, rumble, the entire mountain began to collapse. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The entire mountain with a radius of hundreds of kilometers collapsed with a loud bang. It was like the end of the world. At this moment, all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect had the same thought that shocked them to the extreme. It was Island Master Mo who had cut off this mountain with a single slash. Chapter 502. The mountain was more than 100 kilometers long from east to west and 30 kilometers wide from north to south. But it was cut in half by Wang Yi. What kind of terrifying destructive power was that? Most importantly, they did not see the energy of that slash. His movements were like that of an ordinary person, casually swinging a knife. And it caused such terrifying destruction. What kind of strength was that? Although many of the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had lost their flying skateboards, they could not fly in the air. But they could still slowly float down from the sky. In the smoke and dust from the collapse of the mountain, they slowly floated down to the ground. After a full 15 minutes, only the smoke and dust could be seen. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect slowly landed among the large and small stones on the ground. Qian Xianyue immediately floated down to Mo Shi and clasped her fists to Mo Shi. She said, "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Mo. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have survived today." Mo Shi used his dragon will to investigate. There were many disciples of the Mystic Moon sect within the range of his dragon will. He shook his head slightly and said, "You won't be able to go far with them." Chen Shenhua smiled bitterly and said, "I know, but I really can't bear to leave them behind." Emo pondered for a while and said, "Although my hunting island number 1 is not absolutely safe, it should not be an issue at all to fend off those general corpses." Chen Shenhua was overjoyed when she heard this. She hurriedly bowed to Emo. "Island Master Emo, I thank you for your kindness on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of disciples behind me." Emo shook his head slightly and said, "No need to say more. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I'll give you half an hour to rest. After half an hour, follow me to the first hunting island." In fact, Emo had his own considerations when he was willing to take in the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect. There were only about 50,000 people on the first hunting island. Compared to the huge flaming land, it was still a small force. He could not always guard the first hunting island. Moreover, if the corpse virus wasn't dealt with properly, the entire flaming origin continent might be infected. At that time, the first hunting island would have to face the trillions of general corpses of the flaming dawn continent. Then how could he endure it? The hundreds of thousands of disciples from the Mystic Moon female sect would make up for the lack of manpower on hunting island number 1. 90% of the people who had followed Emo to the flaming dawn continent were men. Women had become a rare species on hunting island 1. They were willing to trust Emo and follow Emo to hunting island 1. Now that there was an opportunity for them to find wives, Emo naturally wouldn't let it go. Thus, in the next few days, Emo led the hundreds of thousands of female disciples and began to migrate. 5 days later, they returned to hunting island 1. The disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw that hunting island number 1 was surrounded by blood-red infected creatures. However, the center was full of vitality. They were all very surprised. The people on hunting island number 1 were overjoyed at the arrival of the Mystic Moon female sect disciples. "It's too beautiful. Look at that one, I like that one. They're like fairies descending from the heavens." "Are you kidding? They're the Mystic Moon female sect, the 3rd largest sect on the Flaming Dawn continent. Mr. Emo is really amazing. He even brought all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to hunting island 1. Let's not talk about other things. In short, we bachelors have a way to survive now." "Thank you, Mr. Emo." Due to the sudden arrival of hundreds of thousands of people, hunting island 1 was not big enough. Emo asked Guijutao to start expanding the living area on hunting island 1. The female disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect also came to help. Although they were all women, they were not inferior to men when it came to work. This was probably because the Mystic Moon female sect was made up of only female disciples. All the work had to be done by these women, which was why they were able to train so well. Just as the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect were settled in, Emo received a system notification in his mind. The number of people in the Dragon Palace has exceeded 100,000. It can be upgraded by 1 level. Do you want to upgrade now? Emo was quite surprised. He had been hesitating whether to use the evolution points in his hand to upgrade the Dragon Palace. However, he had to use his current evolution points to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. This was the only way he could think of to break the siege of the General Corpse. Therefore he did not upgrade the Dragon Palace. He did not expect that the Dragon Palace could be upgraded after bringing back so many disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect. What was there to hesitate about? "Upgrade," Emo said. The system's voice immediately sounded. "This upgrade does not require evolution points, but it will take 72 hours. Therefore, Emo did not leave hunting island 1 for the next 72 hours. In this world, it was possible to encounter infected general corpses everywhere. Therefore it was better to be careful. 3 days later, just as Emo had lunch, the system notification sounded in his mind. Dragon Palace successfully upgraded. Emo quickly checked the Dragon Palace's attributes. Name, Dragon Palace. Level, 5. Members, 231,103. Defense level, able to resist attacks below level 10 Desolate Master, including level 10 Desolate Master. Refining platforms, 10. Other attributes, click to expand. Emo clicked to expand the other attributes and found that there were not many changes to them. Only the addition of 1,000 virtual sentry towers. Emo could place these 1,000 virtual sentry towers within a 10,000 kilometer radius around the Dragon Palace. This way, Emo would be able to see any changes within a 10,000 kilometer radius. The biggest change was the defense level and refining platforms that were displayed on the surface. The defense level was maxed out. In other words, even the strongest existence in the Flaming Origin continent would not be able to break through the defense of Hunting Island 1. Even the current Emoshur would not be able to break through it. The defense level was not weak at all. Another change was that the number of refining platforms had increased to 10. 10 desolate refining platforms meant that 10 desolate masters could be refined. In 3 months he would be able to produce 100 grand desolate masters. It was exciting just thinking about it. When the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw how easy it was to create desolate masters on Hunting Island 1, they felt that their worldview was shattered. From what they knew, every grand desolate master had lived for hundreds of years. First, they had to have absolute talent. Then, they had to train hard and take risks to gain experience in various places. They also needed the support of absolute luck before they could become a grand desolate master. However, this number 1 Hunting Island had produced 10 grand desolate masters in 10 days. This was too much of a bug. Qian Xianyue originally thought that she would take these female disciples to other planets when she had the chance in the future. But when she saw this bug-like refining platform, she finally gave up on this idea. Chapter 503. Qian Xianyue thought, let these female disciples stay here. Perhaps in the near future, many of them would have a chance to become grand desolate masters. As their sect leader, she was happy for them. Therefore, she did not plan to leave immediately. Instead, she contacted the elders in the sect and asked them to bring the desolate hunters to other planets to develop. If there was a chance in the future, she would ask the elders to bring the disciples back. Thinking of the desolate hunter disciples before they left, they were the elites of the sect. But by the time they returned, many of the desolate hunter disciples in the sect might have become grand desolate masters. I don't know how they should feel. In the following days, Emoshur went out every day to kill the general corpses. His evolution points and kill points were also increasing rapidly. Finally one day, in his mind, the system's familiar voice sounded, frowny face kill points have reached 10 billion. Can be upgraded. Emoshur said in his mind without hesitation, upgrade. This upgrade will take 48 hours. Emoshur immediately returned to the first hunting island. He stayed on the first hunting island for 2 days. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face upgrade successful. At the same time, Emoshur's attributes appeared in his mind, frowny face name. Emoshur, level 10 desolate hunter, level 10 long Yenshur. Emoshur saw it and could not help but feel excited. One more level and he would become a grand desolate master. There were so many general corpses on the continent. If he kept killing them, he would be able to get enough kill points. According to his previous experience, another upgrade would require 100 billion kill points. Killing 10 general corpses would give him 1 kill point. Then he would have to kill 1 trillion general corpses. There were only 3 trillion humans in the entire Flaming Land. If he really wanted to get so many kill points, it would mean that at least 1/3 of the Flaming Land's population had become general corpses. Emoshur shook his head. This would not do. He asked in his mind, system, is there no other way to upgrade? If it was in the past, the system would basically remain silent when faced with such a problem. Because the system would usually give the best solution. No other choice would be better than the system's solution. But this time, Emoshur had not expected it. When he asked this question, the system replied instantly, frowny face, there are still 3 options. Emoshur was slightly taken aback. Then he hurriedly said, tell me quickly. The system's voice sounded, frowny face 1. Use all of your current evolution points to upgrade Dragon Palace by 1 level. He could increase the number of refining stations to 100. Each desolate refining platform required 10 days to refine a grand desolate master. As long as the host spends 10 days to refine 100 grand desolate masters, the host will automatically level up. From there, you will be promoted to a grand desolate master. Emoshur's eyes lit up. That was a good idea. However, he quickly rejected this plan. All of his current evolution points still need to be used to sign in the Demon Suppressing Orb. Currently, the Demon Suppressing Orb was the only thing that could be used by others to deal with corpse generals. What about the second one? Emoshur asked. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face 2. With the current speed of the desolate refining platform, it will be able to refine 100 grand desolate masters in 3 months. At that time, the host will automatically level up. Emoshur nodded his head. Yes, this is okay. In other words, even if Emoshur didn't do anything in these 3 months, After 3 months he would also level up. At that time he would directly become a Grand Desolate Master. Other Grand Desolate Masters had to go through untold hardships and hundreds of years to reach the Grand Desolate Master realm. Even if he didn't do anything and just ate, drank, played and slept, he would still reach the Grand Desolate Master realm in 3 months. If other Grand Desolate Masters knew about this, they would vomit blood. Of course, compared to the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform, Immortal's speed was a lot slower. However, the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform only had the fighting strength of normal Grand Desolate Masters. Although Immortal was only a level 10 Desolate Master, his fighting strength was extremely powerful. He could already challenge level 5 to 6 Grand Desolate Masters. This didn't include the Sea Dragon clones bonus. Thus he didn't envy them. What about the third one? Immortal asked. The system replied frowny face 3. Kill a living giant dragon and devour its blood. You can advance to the Grand Desolate Master realm, which is the Giant Dragon realm. When Immortal heard this he was a little speechless. Are there other giant dragons in this world? The system replied frowny face the universe is big, there are all kinds of strange things. Immortal's eyes lit up and he asked. So, there are really places in the universe where giant dragons live? This time the system didn't reply instantly. It directly fell into silence. However, Immortal had already tasted something from the system's words. The system definitely wasn't randomly giving out such a mission. In that case, it shouldn't take too long for him to see a real giant dragon. The second giant dragon other than himself. Of course, it could also be many giant dragons. And from the looks of it, the system seemed to be deliberately pushing him to the opposite side of the giant dragons. The rope given was called the dragon binding rope, and the saber given was called the dragon slaying saber. Even the evolution had evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. If the other giant dragons knew about it, they might try every means to hunt him down. Thinking of this, Immortal seemed to have seen what kind of battle he would face in the near future. Thinking of this, he felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Just reaching the peak of the flaming beginning continent was far from enough. He had to increase his combat strength to a higher level before he met those giant dragons. Therefore, in the next few days, Immortal didn't wait quietly for more than 3 months to pass. Instead, he kept going outside and slaughtering those general corpses. And now, his methods were even more ruthless and he slaughtered faster. His evolution points were also constantly rising. Gradually time passed. In more than 3 months, Immortal's kill points had reached more than 1 billion. Obviously he was still far from reaching 100 billion. However, in these 3 months he had signed in more than 200 demon-suppressing orbs. With so many demon-suppressing orbs he felt a little more relaxed. At the same time, on this day the 100th Grand Desolate Master was refined on the Desolate Refining Platform. In Immortal's mind, a system notification suddenly sounded frowny face after refining 100 Grand Desolate Masters. The host will automatically level up by 1 level. In the next moment, Immortal felt a huge amount of energy suddenly surging through his meridians without any warning. Every cell in his body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Every muscle in his body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Every vein in his body seemed to be about to burst. However, this feeling only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Then, his entire body suddenly felt relaxed. Chapter 504. Compared to other level 10 Desolate Hunters who needed decades to become a Grand Desolate Master, Wang Yi's process was much simpler. The process of his cells coming to life, his muscles tearing, and his meridians bursting only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Soon he felt his body relax. It was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. In his mind, the system's voice also sounded. Promotion successful. Immortal checked his status. Name: Immortal level. Level 1 Grand Desolate Master, Rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon, Level 10 Long Yen Sure Ability. Click to expand. Phew, Immortal let out a long breath. He had finally become a Grand Desolate Master. At the same time, according to the Giant Dragon's power system, he had reached Rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. The dragon race's ranks were Giant Dragon, Evolved Giant Dragon, Super Evolved Giant Dragon, Ancient Giant Dragon, Immemorial Giant Dragon, and so on. Immortal's current level of Evolved Giant Dragon could only be considered as a newbie. Immortal was already an invincible existence in the Flaming Land. This promotion had raised his strength to another level. Of course, this was still not enough. Since the system wanted to train him to become a dragon slayer, he had to continue to increase his strength. Now that he had become a Grand Desolate Master, he needed 1 trillion kill points for every level up. Even if all the people in the Flaming Land turned into general corpses and he killed them all, it would not be enough for him to level up. Thus there were only 2 methods left. One was to use all his evolution points to level up the Dragon Palace and double the number of refining tables. However, this was not a consideration for now. The last method was to slay a dragon. According to the system, as long as he killed a giant dragon, he could level up to a Grand Desolate Master. Now that he was a Grand Desolate Master, he would need to kill at least 10 giant dragons. In the Flaming Land, there was not a single giant dragon other than himself. Where would he find 10 giant dragons? The system's voice quickly sounded. You only need to kill 1 giant dragon to level up. Immortality was surprised. Oh? What? The system replied. The host has not killed a real giant dragon, so killing a giant dragon will level up. Consider it a reward for the host. Immortality nodded. Yes, that's a good idea. But where can I find a dragon? The system fell into silence once again. Immortality shook his head. Once the system remained silent, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that he could only fumble around on his own. For the next 2 months, Hunting Island 1 was peaceful. Every 10 days, the number 1 Hunting Island would produce 10 Grand Desolate Masters. Outside of Hunting Island number 1, the entire continent was not peaceful. The Corpse General had already taken over more and more areas. Almost half of the humans on the Flaming Continent had been infected. In the early stages of the zombie infection, many people had the mentality that the fewer people there were, the safer it would be. Just like a zombie infection, once a zombie got into a densely populated city, the whole city would be in an uproar. If a zombie was thrown into a village with only 20 to 30 families, it was very likely that only the village would be infected. Little did they know that this was equivalent to being surrounded by the commander corpses and then being defeated one by one. By now, people had also realized this. They started huddling together for warmth. At the same time, some cultivators with special attributes such as fire and ice did not die after being infected. Instead, their abilities were greatly improved. After their strength increased, their abilities became the bane of the Corpse General virus. In theory, the Corpse General virus could not be killed. However, cultivators with ice attribute could use their ice attribute energy to freeze the virus. The frozen virus would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As for cultivators with fire attribute, as long as they could raise the temperature of their fire attribute energy to a certain degree, they could directly vaporize the virus. There were also cultivators with lightning attribute energy. Their lightning attribute energy was extremely explosive and destructive. They could vaporize the Corpse General virus with just 1 blow. There were also cultivators with poison attribute energy. After their energy was strengthened, not only would they be immune to the Corpse General virus, the poison attribute energy in their bodies would also have a strong suppressive effect on the Corpse General virus. Therefore, when almost all the Desolate Hunters had fled, there were some heroes who specialized in hunting down the Corpse General virus. Of course, such heroes were very few in number. Therefore, they had a very high status in the hearts of the people. In many cities, the people used these heroes as their leaders to set up defensive lines to defend against the Corpse General virus. As a result, many bases of various sizes gradually formed on the Flaming Continent. When Immortality saw these bases, he could not help but shake his head. It turned out that when he came to the Flaming Continent from Earth, he had jumped from a small fire pit into an even bigger one. Immortality had used his draconic will to briefly scan a few bases. The bodies of the leaders of these bases had been strengthened by the Corpse General virus. Their strength had reached the level of a Grand Desolate Master. However, this was clearly far from enough. There were more and more Corpse General virus outside the bases, and the resources in their bases were decreasing. If they wanted to survive, they had to go out frequently to search for resources. This was unavoidable. After more than 2 months, there were more than 1,500 bases on the Flaming Continent. With so many bases, there were naturally more than 1,500 Grand Desolate Masters with special abilities. It was also at this time that the Corpse General virus began to gather and launch a large-scale attack on the human bases. At first, the people were not prepared, and the Corpse General virus easily broke through more than 100 bases. After that, the people began to strengthen their defenses and defend these bases. However, this was only the beginning. Because the Corpse General virus would only increase, and with these 1,400 experts, the Corpse General virus could not kill as fast as the Corpse General virus could infect them. Among so many experts, apart from Immortality, The strongest was the sect master of the ancient flame sect, Lori. Imo had been killing corpse general virus far away from the bases, so no one knew how strong he was. As a result, Lori seemed to have become the strongest person on the continent. With the ancient flame sect as the base, the radius of the base was more than 100 kilometers. Within this range, the corpse general virus did not dare to show its head. If it did, it would be destroyed by Lori. Lori was in the limelight on the entire flaming continent. Below the Sea Heart waterfall on East End Island. Below the Sea Heart waterfall, there was a huge pool with a radius of 50 kilometers. The seawater from the surrounding waterfalls all gathered in this huge pool. No one knew where the seawater from the surrounding waterfalls went after gathering in this pool. The pool was dark and deep, like a huge black eye gazing at the sky from the bottom of the sea. On this day, at a certain moment, 5 meters above the pool, the air suddenly distorted. Chapter 505. Sea Heart Waterfall, 5 meters above the deep pool. The space suddenly distorted. Then a huge figure suddenly appeared. This huge figure was about 1,000 meters long. It had a pair of wings on its back. Its long tail was also more than 3 meters long. Its body was covered in black scales. There were ferocious spikes on its head. It was a giant dragon. This giant dragon's wings flapped slightly. Its figure instantly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already 5,000 meters above the Sea Heart waterfall. It lowered its head and looked down at the entire sea. Its pitch-black dragon eyes kept turning. Just a few seconds later, its wings flapped again. In the next moment, its figure had already disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already more than 1,000 kilometers away. Its wings flapped again. It reappeared more than 1,000 kilometers to the east. Just like that, it flapped its wings a few times and soon explored the area within 1,000 kilometers of the Sea Heart waterfall. Finally, its figure stopped in the sky above East Pole Island. At the same time, a voice sounded in this giant dragon's right ear. "Kongjiu, have we arrived?" The dragon called Empty Nine chuckled and spoke in a human voice. "That's right. We're here." The voice sounded in its right ear again. "Let's see how the creatures there are. We've been away for tens of thousands of years. They must have grown and are not as weak as before." The giant dragon called Kongjiu smiled and said, "Then I'll test them." The voice in its right ear said, "Just test them. Don't kill them randomly. Every living thing here had a number. If you kill too many, it'll be troublesome if the higher-ups find out." Kongjiu chuckled and said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." East Pole Island had already built a base called East Pole Base. The East Pole Island Lord did not escape from the flame-beginning continent with the others. Instead, he had been protecting the people on the island. No one would have thought that the East Pole Island Lord, who had always been extremely strict, would live and die with the islanders in this moment of life and death. However, he was unfortunately infected with the corpse general virus in a battle with a general corpse. However, not only did the corpse general virus not turn him into a general corpse, but it also greatly strengthened his body. As a result, his strength had soared to level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Moreover, his body had also evolved to a certain extent. The fire attribute energy in his body could vaporize the corpse virus in a short period of time. Since then, he had led the islanders to build the East Pole Base here. At this moment, the people in the East Pole Base were busy building the base. When someone inadvertently raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a huge figure slowly flapping its wings and floating in the sky. And this huge figure was exactly the same as the giant dragon recorded in legends, ancient murals and ancient books. The man's eyes widened in shock. His mouth opened slightly. The person next to him noticed this person's strange behavior and followed his gaze. With one look, his eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly. After a while, his Adam's apple moved with difficulty. His lips moved. He wanted to make a sound. However, he realized that his throat was a little dry. His Adam's apple squirmed again with difficulty before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Giant Dragon." When the others heard his voice, they all looked up at the sky. With one look, everyone was incomparably shocked. "Giant Dragon. It's really a giant dragon. This is a real giant dragon. Is it an illusion? It's impossible. Everyone is hallucinating. This is a real giant dragon." Amidst the shocked cries, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. In the culture of the Flaming Land, almost every race had a giant dragon as their totem. Giant dragons were the most powerful and mysterious creatures in the universe. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were many giant dragons on this continent. However, for some reason all the giant dragons disappeared. Some said that a disaster fell from the sky and caused the giant dragons to go extinct. Some said that the giant dragons could not adapt to the changes in the environment. Some said that the giant dragons went to other planets. Regardless of which theory it was, not a single giant dragon had appeared in the flaming land for tens of thousands of years. And now, a living giant dragon had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? How could they not prostrate themselves in worship? The East Pole Island Lord heard the commotion and also came to the courtyard. When he saw the huge figure that was more than 1,000 meters long in the sky, his entire body seemed to tremble. Giant dragon. This was a real giant dragon. Even someone as powerful as him had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At this moment, the giant dragon that was slowly flapping its wings in the sky suddenly retracted its wings. It dove toward the ground. In almost 3 seconds, it dove to the ground from a height of more than 10,000 meters. A pair of front claws clawed toward the ground. Rumble. Its pair of huge claws drew a huge ravine that was more than 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide on the ground. The hundreds of humans in the ravine were instantly turned into hundreds of corpses under its sharp claws. They were thrown far away. Then its giant tail, which was hundreds of meters long, swept across the area. Rumble. One after another, the buildings collapsed to the ground. Kacha. One by one the trees were snapped. The humans screamed in agony. But this time, hundreds of humans were directly sent to the Yellow Springs. The 200,000 humans who were prostrating on the ground were all dumbfounded. They had always been in awe of giant dragons. After this giant dragon appeared, they immediately prostrated themselves in worship. Why was the giant dragon doing this to them? In their panic, they fled in all directions. However, the speed at which they fled was far slower than the speed at which the giant dragon slaughtered them. Every time the giant dragon's tail swept across, at least 100 people would be smashed into meat paste. This scene was even more terrifying than any monster movie. When the East Pole Island Master saw this, he was also terrified at first. Like these humans, he did not know why the giant dragon would suddenly attack these humans. But soon, the fear in his heart was replaced by anger. These humans under his command worshipped the giant dragon so much. Even in their hearts, they did not dare to disobey the giant dragon in the slightest. Some even offered incense to the giant dragon and prayed to it every day. They never imagined that the giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere would treat them like this. In his anger, a fiery red spear condensed in his right hand. This fiery red spear seemed to be condensed from magma. Holding the spear in his right hand, he roared, "Evil dragon, die." As he spoke, he threw the spear in his right hand at the giant dragon. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.